My name is Karen Barker. I'm the Executive Manager and Head of Government Projects for the Australia-India Institute. Welcome to this workshop. This is the third in our series of workshops that we're running as part of the Australia-India Technical Exchange Program in Water and Food Security. We're delighted to be partnering with the Australia-India Water Centre for this workshop series. Before I go on, I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. For those of you who are joining us from India, we make this acknowledgement of Australia's traditional owners in recognition of the ongoing and unbroken connection between Australia's First Peoples and the land that we call Australia. And today, I'm joining you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders, both past and present, and extend my respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here with us today. And I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to all of our distinguished speakers and all of you joining us this morning from India and this afternoon from Australia. And welcome back to those who've joined us on previous occasions. This workshop is part of the activities of the joint working group convened under the bilateral MOU, and that's the one on water resources management, and it aims to share policy and technical expertise and experiences. And that MOU is led in India by the Ministry of Jal Shakti through the Central Water Commission and the National Hydrology Project, and in Australia by the Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment. And this workshop's also supported today by the Department of Education, Skills and Training in Australia, Education, Skills and Employment. And we appreciate the practical work support that they provide in this key area of water and food security. So the Institute's delighted to be partnering with the Australia-India Water Centre in bringing you these workshops. So the centre is a consortium of universities and research institutions in Australia and in India. I think there's 9 in Australia and 15 in India and growing. And that centre aims to foster research, education and training and capacity building in all aspects of water in both countries. And that includes addressing critical water security and sanitation challenges. So in Australia, the centre is led by Western Sydney University, and in India, it's led by the Indian Institute of Technology in Guwahati. The Australia-India Institute is one of the members of the Water Centre, and that's through our host university, the University of Melbourne. So over the past 3 weeks, we've hosted workshops on some of the key issues in water, and they're primarily an opportunity to hear from researchers and water professionals about their knowledge and experience. So we want to give you an opportunity to think about collaborating with counterpart researchers in India or Australia and what you'd like to collaborate on. And in fact, one of the parts of this workshop is that we'd like to give you an opportunity to do some networking at the end of the session. And to further allow researchers to connect, the Australia-India Institute has developed a virtual hub. So I just wanted to mention that to you in case you haven't heard about it. It's the Australia Researcher Cooperation Hub in India, or ARCH India, and that has been set up with support from the Department of Education, Skills and Employment. And it's a virtual platform that helps researchers to build relationships and share information and expertise. And it's currently open for early access, so it's not yet officially launched, but there's a lot of material there, and I'd encourage you to have a look at the website, and we're going to be sharing the link in the chat shortly. And we're also going to be using that website to promote some initiatives and some grant opportunities that will support research collaboration in water in the coming months. So I would now like to invite Professor Alistair Rendell to say a few words. So Professor Rendell is the Vice President and Executive Dean of the College of Science and Engineering at Flinders University. So Professor Rendell, could I invite you to make some introductory remarks?
So thank you, Dr. Barker. So I would like to, firstly, I would like to acknowledge that I am actually sitting on Ghana land and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd like to thank the organisers and sponsoring agencies of this important workshop series for inviting me to say a few opening remarks. The importance of water to our communities is self-evident, and this is particularly true here in South Australia. The Technical Exchange Programme provides an opportunity to share our expertise and experiences to sustainably manage water resources for social, health, and economic benefits for our communities. Many of you will be aware that the College of Science and Engineering at Flinders University hosts the National Centre for Groundwater Research and Training. So-called NCGRT conducts translational research in the utilisation and management of groundwater resources, much of it with international collaborators. Our Masters and PhD programs, with significant international student participation, train the next generation of groundwater and water resource management experts for Australia and elsewhere. In addition, the environmental health group within the college have significant expertise in the public health aspects of wastewater quality and reuse, notably developing an award-winning nature-based sustainable wastewater treatment and reuse system for rural communities in South Australia. In addition, working with the local council, the group here has championed the creation of the so-called Oakland Parks Wetlands Education Centre. This is a STEM outreach, training and research centre focused on a constructed urban wetland integrated with a managed aquifer recharge scheme, which was recently awarded the National Stormwater Association's Award for Innovation and Research. At Flinders University, we are proud that this combined expertise has resulted in us being ranked 17th in the world for water resources in 2021 by the Shanghai Rankings Global Ranking Academic Subjects list. This is the 5th successive year in which the university has been within the top 20 of this world ranking. This timely workshop on wastewater reuse provides great opportunity to develop and establish collaborative research and training between Indian and Australian experts to address water resource management issues common to both countries. While I am unable to join you for the full workshop, I look forward to hearing the outcomes from my colleagues and to assisting you in the establishment of collaborative training and research initiatives arising from the workshop. I wish you all well in your deliberations, and thank you again for the opportunity to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Professor Rendell. We appreciate those words, and it's really exciting to hear about the activities that Flinders University is undertaking to support water security and water resources. Thanks for joining us today. Right, well, we're now moving into the technical part of our workshop, and I'm just going to very briefly run through the format with you. We're going to start with two 20-minute presentations, and there will be a short time for questions after each of those presentations. We'll then have some breakout room discussions for half an hour with some reporting back. And then we're going to follow that with an open forum. We're going to hear some remarks from two panelists, and then there'll be an open forum where you can have your questions and answers, Q&A. And that will bring us to the close of the workshop session. Before we start introducing our presenters, I just want to remind you of our objectives here today. So we're here to share expertise and experiences in relation to wastewater reuse management and sustainability. And we'll hear from our distinguished speakers, but we also want to hear from each of you. So please participate in a spirit of openness and share all your ideas and case studies and experiences, including the challenges. We want to hear all about it because it's all, good lessons for us all. And we also want this workshop to provide a setting where you can think about your research collaboration between Australia and India. We want to give you an opportunity to network with each other. So at the end of the workshop today, you'll be invited to stay on for an additional half an hour. We're going to keep breakout rooms open, and there'll be different themes related to our wastewater reuse management and sustainability topic. So I'll tell you more about that later in the program. But now I would like to introduce our first presenter. So we have Dr. Lakshminarayana Rao, and he's an assistant professor at the Indian Institute of Science in the Centre for Sustainable Technologies. He has a decade of industrial experience working in the field of plasma technology, and that research has included decentralised wastewater treatment, wastewater quality and recycling, and he's also developed various plasma technologies. So Dr. Rao, we look forward very much to hearing from you in relation to your Bangalore case study. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope I am audible to all the participants of this workshop. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of the workshop for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to present the problem that we are working on, which is basically large-scale recycling of treated wastewater from Bangalore to a neighboring village called Taluk, called district called Kolar. Yeah. So what you see here on the opening slide is one of the tanks which are filled with treated water. I'll talk more about it. Please feel free to stop me and ask questions if you have any. So what is the contents of the presentation? Really, I'll talk about the background and motivation, which is already known. We need to, and then the necessity for reusing the water. So that's pretty much known. And the project, reuse of treated water from Bangalore to the neighboring villages, how it has been achieved, how the water is being managed. I'll move on to some impacts, how this project has affected the groundwater table, what is its impact on agriculture, economy, and overall benefits of this project for the neighboring districts of Bangalore. Then the learnings that we have got from this study, and there are a lot of open questions which still needs to be answered. I'll just touch upon them. And then if there are more questions, definitely I would be very happy to answer. So what you see is a picture of a barren or a dried up tank bed. So you can see there's absolutely no water. So this is taken from one of the drought-prone taluks of Kolar. So what is this? What is the background for such a big recycling project? Is Kolar and Chikbalapur districts are neighboring districts of Bangalore. They were continuously drought hit for the past 10 years before 2018. So what the government of Karnataka decided to do was, Bangalore has a lot of treated wastewater, close to about 1500 MLD of that. They decided to take that, about 440 MLD of from STPs and pump it through pipe network to these Kolar and Chikbalapur tanks. So these are man-made tanks which existed well before, during the civilization itself. So these tanks were filled, and so that the water would flow from one tank to the other. So these are network of tanks which were available or which were built way back when people settled in these areas. So the project itself started in 2018, but it ran into some legal problems. But then by February 2019, those were all solved. And from 2019 February, water is continuously flowing. About 400 MLD of water is being pumped to these two taluks. So today, as of today, about 137 tanks have been filled, providing irrigation to 24,000 hectares of land. So it's one of the biggest recycling projects in India as of now. Nearly 2 million people are direct beneficiaries of this scheme. So there's a big impact because water has been flowing there and it has had a big impact on the people. So what is the scheme? So what you see here, I don't know if I can pick a pointer. Yeah, so here is a STP. There are two STPs here in Bangalore. You can see my pointer. Water is pumped through pipe network through to this first discharge chamber called the DC point, which is about 100 kilometers away. And from then on, it either flows through gravity, or wherever it is not possible for gravity, they pick up the water from here and then bring it to the highest point in there, and from there water again flows. So it's both most of the water flows in open channels, starting this DC point. Wherever such options are not available, it is pumped in pipe networks, brought to the highest point, and then from there on it flows in open channels from tanks to tanks. The project is located, here is the map of India. We are Karnataka. In Karnataka, there is this district called Kolar. So this is where it is, and a major portion of this Kolar is fed with this now treated water. And this treated water is stored 24/7, 365 days of a year. So water is available. So the impact of that, you can imagine, it will have on groundwater table. The objective of this project again is to ensure that this water, which is stored in these tanks, is used for indirect recharge of groundwater table, not for direct use. So a lot of precautions were taken to ensure and to educate people that this treated water should not be consumed directly, but should be consumed after picking it up from the bore wells which are neighboring to these tanks. Here is a picture of that. So this objective, as I said, is indirect recharge of groundwater. So this is the DC point we call the discharge chamber, and you can see that the treated water is flowing from one tank to the other. So these are some pictures of tanks before. That is the first tank, which is called the Lakshminarayana tank. And this is how it was before water had gone. So it was completely dry. Here is the DC point. You can see on the picture on the right, and the water is flowing and the water is filled up in this tank. And the overflow from this tank goes to the downstream tank, and it continues that way. So in this picture, you can see tank here, it's another tank there, the third tank and the fourth tank and the fifth tank. So it keeps on moving from one water to the tank. Depending upon the capacity of the tank, the residence time of the water in these tanks are different. And this helps natural groundwater percolation and eventually start increasing the groundwater table, and also the quality of the underground water. So here is another picture where you can see some, lilies growing and of the tanks. What was the standard of quality of the water which is being filled? When we started this project, there were 2 STPs, and the STPs were not up to the mark. This was a discharge standard set by the National Green Tribunal for the discharge of treated water to surface water bodies. So they really were concerned more about the nitrogen and the phosphorus. So the standard was total nitrogen should be less than 10, and total phosphorus measured as PO4 should be less than 1. So that was the very strict standard set, obviously for reasons of avoiding of eutrophications of these tanks. And when the project itself was started, these is built.
Dr. Rao, your audio is breaking. Could you please put off your video? So let's try that.
I don't know if I can stop video. Yeah, I can try that.
Yeah, just try that. Thank you.
Yeah, so I don't know how much of you heard, how much of what I said was heard. So I'll try to go slow, and then whatever is missed, please feel free to ask. So what I was saying is, when the project started, the discharge standards set for discharging of treated water from STPs is as shown in this column over here. The 2 STPs which were built way back in 1980s were not meeting these discharge standards. There was a lot of interventions done, process modifications done to ensure that the STPs start meeting this discharge standard. So it took us about 6 months for that to achieve, and I'm not getting into the details of how it was achieved because of the lack of time. So significant modifications were done to the bioreactor part of the STP. Basically, some virtual anoxic zones were created to promote simultaneous nitrification and denitrification, through which we were able to reduce the total nitrogen of the effluent to less than 10. And it was around 6, and the nitrogen, because of the luxury phosphorus consuming bacteria, the phosphorus was also reduced to less than 1. And this water was now sent to the Kolar, and here as you can see, it's an average of many samples, and the water which is really reaching Kolar now meets the most strict effluent discharge standards set by NGT. One more picture of another lake, Kendati Lake, which was before and after. Here are some of the pictures of the impact of the KC Valley project on the flora and fauna of it. So the tanks are now filled with treated water, because of which the underground water table has increased, because of which a lot of migratory birds have come back, and it is promoting tourism. People have started growing eucalyptus, which was being grown, has been uprooted. Now people have gone back to growing vegetables. Instead of having 1 crop per year, now they have having 3 crops. The farmers are doing 3 crops per year. They are back to growing flowers, vegetables, fruits, as much as even paddy is starting to grow, which is water intensive crops. So these are also being grown. Some more pictures of it, some herons. These tanks are also auctioned off to fisheries department so that they can also do fish cultivation in there. So people are also doing fishery in these tanks. What you see here is the change in groundwater levels because of the storage of water from in these tanks. What you see on the x-axis is the number of years. So we have monthly borewell data. This is from a borewell which is close to Narsapura, which is one of the 5th tank in this cluster 1. What you see on the y-axis is the groundwater levels, and the project really started in 2018, and then it ran into some problem. By 2019, really the project was going on. What you see on top are the rainfall patterns. So the rainfall patterns were more or less before 2018 to after 2018. There is not much difference. What you can see here is this borewell, which was very close to Narsapura, has really started behaving. And what you would imagine if in the absence of this KC Valley project, that the groundwater levels will be very shallow. So they would go all the way up to, here it was upwards of 20 meters below ground level. But after the KC Valley project, it is less than 5 meters in the ground level. And this water remains constant for all the months of the year. So there is no change in the water level, indicating that the groundwater is being continuously charged with the water which is stored in this tank. Same example here, one more tank, Kolar borewell, which is also in the cluster 1 area. And you can see here is that before 2018, the underground water levels were in the range of 30 to 35 meters. Whereas after this project was started, the groundwater level significantly improved. There is a 30 meters. It has now come down to about 10 meters below ground level. And your rainfall pattern is shown over here. So this water to the ground, underground water has started to respond, and it is now being held constant. Before this project, there were areas in Kolar which were more than 2,000 feet below. So people were picking up water from as below as 2,000 feet. So they had multi-staged pumps which they were putting in, and from where the water has been picked up. So the cost of water was very high because they had to pick up from such deep levels. And also the water quality was very hard. So they were getting a lot of dissolved salts in that water because they were picking it up from such low levels. Now the water quality has improved. I don't have the monthly data yet. So I've seen some data which is now just started to come in. The water quality has also improved because of the dilution effect coming in from this Kolar project. Here are some of the bore wells which are not affected by KC Valley. So just for comparison, I'm giving, so this is in cluster 5 where the water had not reached yet. So it has just reached now. So what we can see now is actually as the years progress, the water level, the underground water levels are actually going down and down. So it is showing that there is a lot of exploitation of the underground water, and you can see here the levels that I was talking about. So this is close to about 250 meters below ground level. So very, very deep ground level water has been exploited in this area. Here is some data on the income to farmers. So what we have done is we went and did some household surveys, about 50 households which were affected by KC Valley and some 50 not affected by KC Valley. What you can see here is an average number of that. For example, in this row, you see tomato crop. If I take an average of that, so an average value would be 2,47,000 rupees coming in from a farmer who is affected by KC Valley, whereas a non-KC Valley farmer in the same time he made some about 50% less, 1,25,000. So there is a double income for tomato. Same thing that you can see for mulberry, it is about 165% change in the income. Livestock also there is a change. Because of overall improvement in the economics, they have also started giving more money in terms of services, in terms of rental income. They are building better houses. Each house now has secure water source, because of which their livelihoods have improved. So every house is now have a two-wheeler, they have a TV in the house, they have fan in the house, sometimes have fridge in the house. So we now notice that there is a significant change in the economic status of these farmers because of the KC Valley project. And people are happy with this project. Initially, there were lots of apprehensions about this project. What will happen to the quality of the treated water? Will it spoil the underground water levels or the underground water quality? But after this project, over the past 4 years, people have found that they are they're highly benefited and they are happy about this project. So some of the learnings from this project, it has had a very positive impact on water table, economy. Thanks to Corona, people who are living in cities are now moved back to the villages. There is a reverse migration that we see, and there is improved tourism. People who were, working, the land which was now full with eucalyptus has been uprooted. Now they are going back to growing fruits, vegetables, pulses, and cereals. And this project is a very good example of circular economy, because the fruits and vegetables which are grown is now coming back to cities like Bangalore and where it is being sold. So the wastewater is going from the city which was always considered as a sink of resources. Now it's becoming a source of treated water, and this source of treated water is kind of promoting the circular economy. The reason being, the vegetables and fruits which are being grown is coming back to Bangalore, and the waste which is here in Bangalore is going back to these villages. So we have a nice circular economy which is coming in because of this. The rural ecosystem has improved. And the big problem of Bangalore city, which is basically how do you treat so much water and what do you do with this treated water? So now it has become a solution for neighboring villages. Based upon this success, the recent newspaper article tells that India is now looking at having such projects all over, and they want to at least fill 75 tanks on the 75th anniversary of independence. So that is what is being discussed. There are still a lot of open questions. So the open questions is, how do you efficiently manage and distribute this treated water? So phase 2, for example, of KC Valley, they want to now fill 272 tanks. So what is the optimum way of doing it? Do you fill one big tank and then let water percolate and create a mound around that underground water, or do you fill many tanks? What is the recharge rate which is happening because of filling? One has a benefit of lower evaporative losses, where the other one has a benefit that, you know, it will impact a larger area. So these are some of the open questions. So what is the recharge rate and how does underground water travel? Next important question is, what is the quality of this recharge rate? So if you were to fill this one big tank, then your recharge rates that you would imagine to be a lot higher. So it would percolate a lot faster. The residence time would be a lot lower. Given this low residence time, what happens to the overall water quality? Does the water quality go down because it is going at a faster rate? Or does the water quality irrespective remain the same? So this is another question that needs to be answered. The other big question to answer is, what is the effluent discharge standard for such secondary treated water applications, which is indirect recharge of groundwater using secondary treated water? The NGT standards, which we call the 1050 standard, POD less than 10, COD less than 50. Is this adequate? Do we need to really bring down the nitrogen to less than 10 and less than 1? Can we not use it as a source of fertilizer, as a source of nutrient, without really causing a lot of eutrophication? Is there a possibility? This question still needs to be answered. Do we need to get to that strict levels? Second is, what are long-term impacts of such use of treated water in these tanks? Now, the tanks, if I take a seasonal variation, it would fill up because of the rain, and then it would empty during the year, during the non-rainy season. But because of this project, now these tanks remain filled throughout the year. What is that effect on the overall structure of the tank? What is the effect of that on the recharge rates? What is the effect of that on your underground water raise? So all these open questions are there, not barring the effects or the problems which might come from emerging micropollutants, which we are not even discussing in these treated waters. So these are some of the open questions which still needs to be answered. What is the long-term impact still needs to be answered. So these are some of the questions that we are also pondering and trying to answer. With that much, for the limited time, I will stop. I would like to first of all thank all the team members of IISc, Professor Mohan Kumar, Professor Chanakya, Dr. Kavita, Dr. Manjari, and all the students who worked on this project in analyzing water quality data. I have a lot of data on water quality in all these tanks. Because of the time, I am not getting into the details, but if you have questions, I'll be very happy to answer and then, shed more light on this project. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Backer.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rao. I'm Okke Batelaan from Flinders University, and I will take over for a moment the discussion. So again, thank you, Dr. Rao, a very interesting presentation. And I invite everybody online to ask questions. You can do that most easily via the chat. We will pick them up and can transfer them to Dr. Rao. We have some minutes to, at least 5 minutes to have discussion. We're well on time. So anybody who likes to ask a question, please, this is the time and moment. Until that moment that somebody asks questions, I maybe have a first question to open the discussion, Dr. Rao. You very nicely presented the opportunities that these systems have for not only Bangalore, but maybe also for other cities. What was the most difficult part in terms of implementation? What was the biggest limitation? Can you tell us a bit more about that? Such that other cities could learn from that?
Yeah, definitely. So couple of things. So I also see 1 or 2 questions in the chat box, but I will also address them after answering your question. So when the project really was started, there were a lot of apprehensions, and it actually ran into some legal problems as well. So one of the apprehension that was there was on this presence of heavy metals. Yeah. So there was a thought process that the sewage itself will have a lot of heavy metals, which is not necessarily true. And they thought that it might go and then may contaminate the underground water, right? So that was one of the biggest apprehensions, and people were not ready to accept this water, because in India, even today, use of, a reuse of wastewater is something culturally not, embarrassing to begin with. So although there was a lot of resistance that, you need to really treat it to the highest level, like tertiary treatment, and do RO systems and then pump it. So there were one group of people arguing that way, and the other group of people saying that, no, it's a waste of money to get to RO systems and to get to such high levels. You can still do with secondary treated water. And there is a lot of back and forth. And the biggest legal problem that they went into was the presence of heavy metal, or the so-called fear of heavy metal. So we went ahead, and then, I don't know if I have some slides here, I'll try to show you. There was a lot of, we did some fundamental studies and looking at how heavy metal might not even be present in that. So because your sewage undergoes anaerobic digestion, when it goes undergo anaerobic digestion, we actually demonstrated that, there is your sulfate reducing bacteria, which will consume up all your heavy metals and precipitate it out, and there will be no heavy metals found, or there is no chance for heavy metals to be even present in that water. First of all, sewage, municipal sewage will not have heavy metal. Even if comes through because of any urban runoff, it will be precipitated. So that has to be demonstrated. We went ahead, and here is one example of that sulfate reduced bacteria doing it. And then we went ahead and really showed for all the inlets. So these are all different. What you see here, maybe I'll just do this one, and you can see. So you can see here is for all the heavy metals which are listed in the drinking water standards. We showed that even the raw sewage which is coming in will be very, very low, and the STP inlet itself will not have, and the STP outlet definitely will not have any heavy metals. So this was shown to the courts, and they agreed, and then they started letting the water in. Once the water flowing in, once they started seeing the advantage of this project, now there is a lot of demand for the water. So there is a lot of internal, fight, theft of water, all kinds of stuff happening to really get more water from it. So the challenge was initial apprehension that this water might not be very good and it might be contaminate their groundwater. Once that apprehension is removed, now the challenge is, how do we, they want more water. Everybody wants water, and now people are, doing all kinds of stuff to steal this water, or, divert channels, put bunds, and all kinds of stuff that they are doing. Everybody wants water now. The government also recognizes that, and now they are embarking on phase 2 to fill 272 tanks, which will start in the next year or so.
Yeah,
excellent.
Dr. Rao, it would be great to also answer a few more of the questions, because we have several coming in. There is one question about is there a charge of the villages for the pumping?
No, the pumping is free, so there is no charge. Even as a matter of fact, even there are 2 government departments who are associated with this. One which is called the Minor Irrigation Department, who are really in charge of picking up the water from Bangalore and delivering it to the tanks of Kolar. Then there is another department called the Bangalore Water Supply and Sewerage Board, who are responsible for collecting the wastewater from the city, Bangalore city, and treating it. So there is a lot of argument that, MI department should pay some fees to BWSSB to treat this water. But the government has said, okay, we are in the same umbrella. We don't pay for fresh water coming in from Mysore, where drinking water is picked up. So water is free. So nobody pays no charge. It is the taxpayer of the city who is paying for this charge, for treatment of this charge. So, and the government is it's heavily subsidized. So the government is paying for it, and that is what is happening.
There is another question on the residual chlorine of treated water at the tanks, or what that level is.
Yes, Professor Roger also has one more question. Can the effluent be better treated before pumping to villages?
Yeah.
So this is a big question now. So to what standard do you want to treat, and what is the objective that you want to achieve? Obviously, when you start treating to higher and higher levels, your cost of treatment will go up, and then you, at one point in time, you need to draw a line and say that what is it you want to do. One argument is treat it to drinking water standard and filling into these tanks. Is that rational? Once this water is staying in these tanks, you want that tank to act like a living system. That is, you want phytoplankton to grow in there, algae to grow in there to small amounts, and then feed fish, and then have some kind of a living system in there. If you put too much chlorine in that water, let us say you want to put 1 or 1.5, then there will be no life in that water. Do you want to create such non-living tanks, or do you want to create a living tank and have an ecosystem coming in there? If there are fishes, there are herons. If there are herons, it adds to your the total ecosystem. It will take away you don't need to put so much pesticides, because it feeds on the worms and the bacteria and the other stuff, forms of life. So you create some kind of a circular cycle of life. And one group argues that secondary treatment is good enough. The other group argues that you treat it to the highest level, do RO, and then send it to that. So there is still a debate going on, but this project is on secondary treated water. So far, no negative impacts per se. And the chlorine levels that are maintained as of now is about 0.8 at the TC point, 0.8 milligram per liter. Yes, there are, I am reading the questions here. There is a question on emerging micropollutants and microplastics. Yes, there is a study. Unfortunately, even in India, drinking water itself is not being looked at for micropollutants and emerging pollutants. So now we are talking about wastewater emerging micropollutants in it. There is a study going on. As a matter of fact, in my own group, we are looking at microplastics and emerging micropollutants and what is the fate of them as the water moves from one tank to the tank. So this is an ongoing study. We don't have results yet. We do see some of the emerging micropollutants present in it, but what is the fate? It is still an ongoing study. So we are considering and we are looking at it from a larger perspective, with a perspective that does it cause any bacterial resistance for long-term health impacts. So this is what is being considered and looked at.
Yeah, excellent, Dr. Rao. I see there are more questions coming in, and so clearly you have touched upon the reaction of the people and made them very interested. I suggest that some of those questions maybe can also flow into the later discussions, but I'm afraid we have now to move on to the next presentation.
Yeah, a couple of questions. Yeah, human health is being monitored. We actually went and got the human health data. I don't see it is on the same. So no raise in dengue, no raise in malaria, no raise in any of the waterborne diseases because of this water. Yeah, so that's what is the found. I'll just quickly try to see if I can get any questions. How does the aquifer change the microbial quality of the water? Remains the same, not much of a difference we see. If I see a long stretch of water, it will go down. Local people local people are very happy. So viruses, protozoa, helminthus, yeah, it's still a study. So we do find viruses in this water. Either does it come from bird droppings? Does it come from, what is the source of it? We are still trying to figure out. So we still don't know the answer for that. But there are some viruses, protozoa present in this water.
Fantastic, very good. Karen?
Thanks, Okke, and thank you very much, Dr. Rao. We'll move on to our next presenter. So we have Dr. Anne-Maree Boland with us, and Dr. Boland is a principal at RMCG Consulting, She has 25 years experience in dealing with natural resource and water management in agricultural industries. So we're going to hear from her. A nice counterpart to the Bangalore story is Dr. Boland will tell us about opportunities for using recycled water in Australian agriculture. Thanks.
Thanks, Karen. And I'd just like to thank the organisers, particularly Basant, who I have worked with over the years, and suggested that I might be able to present on some of the work that we did some time ago. I'm just, sorry, having some problems. I'll just stop sharing. So I started sharing again. Can everyone see that? Yeah.
Yes, that's coming through, Anne-Maree.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is some of the opportunities for using recycled water in Australian agriculture. I will be providing just a general overview, so some of the challenges and issues that we have faced in relation to recycled water. So this is just a bit of a summary of what I'll be running through. First of all, how important is recycled water in Australia? What are some of the drivers and barriers that we need to consider when looking at recycled water? And I'll look at both the farming context and also some of the external factors that we need to consider. Then the other thing is I'll run through a couple of case studies that we have been involved with around the agriculture sector, particularly viticulture, vegetables, and the pasture industry producing dairy cows. So just to touch on, first of all, sorry, I'm just having trouble getting it to go to the next slide. Okay, just to touch on recycled water in Australian agriculture. So we have a very large and significant irrigated agriculture sector, and a lot of that is from either rivers, surface water, but also groundwater, and we have large irrigation schemes. And the total volume of irrigated agriculture water used in the last ABS accounts, which was 2019 to 2020, was about 7,230 gigalitres. And this has been declining over time, particularly with a lot of that water moving to higher value crops. So you can see from 2014 to 2015 up to now, there's been quite a decrease in the amount of water that's been extracted from the environment, and also that's been delivered in our irrigation systems. If we think about the recycled water side of things, we have about 312 gigalitres of treated effluent that's been supplied, and of that only about 86 is going to agriculture. So if we look at that volume plus the industrial sources of wineries and milk factories, which also have water which is reused, it really only represents about 2% or less than 2%. But importantly, the value of reuse water is quite high. It's important in peri-urban areas where we have competing uses. It's also can be very useful for fit for purpose use. And the quality can be suitable for end use, depending on the contaminants that are in the source. Importantly, in the millennium drought in early 2000, recycled water was very important for increasing the security and reliability of water for a number of our agricultural sectors, particularly the horticulture industry. A lot of horticultural vegetables are grown around the major cities, and in South Australia, Victoria and New South Wales, the recycled water around those cities was very important. So the use of recycled water in Australia is highly regulated. We have State Department of Health who are monitoring and set standards for microbial pathogens. We also have other contaminants of interest, PFAS and other chemicals are becoming of more interest all the time. So we have a highly regulated system, and also we have strong guidelines around what can and can't be done. Our water from particularly treated effluent water is treated to high standards, and we have a system of class A, B, C and D. And for products such as vegetables, we expect the highest standards of class A. Over the years, there's been many issues around the social perceptions and acceptance of recycled water, but I think now past the time of the drought, everyone's quite comfortable with the use of recycled water in agriculture. We also have a number of environmental risks that are managed by our state environmental protection agencies, and of particular interest from an agricultural perspective are salinity, acidicity, nutrients, chlorine residuals, boron, and also the hydraulic conductivity. So making sure that we don't minimise the drainage that can be achieved. So as I mentioned earlier, we have classes of water based on health standards that are suitable for specific users, e.g. Class A water is suitable for salad vegetables. So using recycled water, whether it be from treatment plants or from dairy processing or wineries, requires additional management. As I mentioned, in particular, from an agronomic point of view, salinity is really the significant one. We also need to manage the nutrients, so mainly nitrogen and phosphorus. And in addition, we often have to consider on-farm storage. So for a lot of the work that we've been doing over the last 15 to 20 years has been producing guidelines to assist farmers when using recycled water. And these are just two examples that we have around horticulture and also pasture and fodder crops. One of the things that we need to think about when we're looking at recycled water scheme is what are some of the drivers and barriers to using recycled water? And this is very complex, and I'm not going to go through all of the points that are listed in this slide, but there's a whole lot of things that are considered by farmers, both at a farming context point of view, but also by the broader community and government around some of the external factors. So if we think of some of the social factors, we're looking at, the individual's personal values, their attitude to risk, what they want to do with their farm in the future. And a lot of these farms happen to be situated around the major cities. And so a lot of the farmers are actually looking to succession and thinking about, well, maybe we'll just sell up and won't bother about the longer term view because our land will be worth more in the next 15 to 20 years. So that's a very significant issue for a lot of the schemes that we have looked at in the past. Also, the farming system. So for high value crops in horticulture, for example, we need reliable and secure source of water. It needs to be fit for purpose and high quality. But for some of the other crops, that is not so much the case. So an example I'll touch on a bit later is the Werribee Irrigation District, and those vegetable farmers needed to have certainty around the quality of water that they were going to get for the next 5 to 10 years. We also, there's a lot of consideration around investing in recycled water schemes from a farmer point of view. As I mentioned, is there going to be a long-term benefit from contributing funds into a recycled water system? So if they have high debt ratios, then perhaps that's not an option for them. I've also mentioned some of the external factors. There's so many things that happen at a socio-political level around, is there an appetite for developing land? Are there restrictions due to planning issues? What are the long-term objectives from a farming point of view for that parcel of land? How does the consumer accept some of these products? And do we think about an individual or collaborative approach to some of these larger schemes? Also, we have, just the other alternative water supplies. What are some of the other options that might be available? Is there surface water supply? Is it declining? Are there aquifers around? What's the irrigation infrastructure? And is there an interest in putting investment into some of that irrigation infrastructure? If, for example, in 10 to 20 years, there's going to be houses being built in that region. So it's a really complex decision to make. Also, some of the economic issues around regional development, ensuring that we have a consistent market for vegetables or other crops, and that we continue to get that market acceptance. And probably 15 to 20 years ago, that market acceptance was a real issue. It's less so an issue at the moment. Okay, so I'd like to perhaps just touch on a few case studies that we've been looking at over time. The first one, for people that are in Victoria, will be familiar with the Bellarine Peninsula. It's a highly developed, or getting quite developed population-wise region, but it also has a basis of tourism and agriculture. And so Barwon Water, which is the local water supply authority, is looking at developing up a new recycled water scheme, and it would provide about 450 megalitres, Class B water, approximately 1,000 EC, and mainly used for wine grapes. The benefits of this scheme would be employment and agricultural productivity on the Bellarine Peninsula, the opportunity to preserve the Bellarine's landscape and livability, which is seen as unique, lower water bills for Barwon Water customers, and also it addresses the community's preference for water recycling over discharge. So it's really addressing that desire from the community to make sure that we don't discharge water to the bay. The other big added bonus was the avoidance of water restrictions by using this recycled water for the agriculture industry. The second example that I wanted to mention was, and I've mentioned this a couple of times, was recycled water for vegetable production. But it was also for a tourist precinct in that area where there's the Werribee Zoo. There's also a number of polo fields and gardens, and it's really a hub for tourism. So we are using recycled water in that Werribee tourism precinct, but also, as I mentioned, on the vegetable farms in that region. So this example is being run by Southern Rural Water. They have about 400 growers that are receiving recycled water, and also, as I mentioned, the sporting fields and the Werribee Zoo. It's Class A water, so it needs to be Class A water because the water is being directly sprinkled onto the leaves of the crops. And the quality is pretty good, less than 800 EC. And the way that they achieve that less than 800 EC is by mixing the water with the irrigation supply that comes directly from the Werribee River. So it's green space and vegetable production. So the benefits of this scheme were very much around supplementing water availability from the existing irrigation scheme. It was really precipitated because of the drought and provided an alternative to the Werribee irrigation traditional supply during that drought period. And it was the growers that went to the Water Authority and said, we need to do something. The water can be shandied with irrigation water to ensure that it's of a reasonable EC. It uses water from the wastewater treatment plant, which is very close by, which is a bonus. It reduces the discharge into Port Phillip Bay, and it means that the growers have a secure and reliable source of water. So that's a big bonus. The last example I wanted to mention was there's also, rather than water coming from the treatment plants, we also have water that comes from various milk processing companies. And this is applied to individual farms. For various schemes, it could be anything in the order of 200 to 1,000 megalitres per year. Because it doesn't fall under that treated effluent, we don't have the Class A, B, C system, but it is equivalent to a Class B type water. It's what we call fit for purpose. And although it might start off as a 2,000 to 4,000 EC, it's shandied to approximately 800 EC so that it can be used on pastures and forage crops. So the benefits of this example, it's providing an additional nutrient source, and for the pasture industry, extra nitrogen and phosphorus is a real bonus. It prevents contaminants entering waterways. It supplements water available from irrigation systems, but it also closes the loop on the nutrients and water moving towards that circular economy. And it also meets EPA requirements for use of industrial water. Okay, so I guess in conclusion, we've worked on recycled water, and there's many schemes around Australia which have been really successful over the years. I guess I'd also say that the interest in recycled water changes depending on whether there's a drought or not. And so, I think that the argument would be that we need to be prepared for the next drought. So although recycled water is a relatively small contributor, it is a really important contributor. And I just want to make sure that that message really gets across. And it's not just the production, agriculture and horticulture, but it's also for green space and amenity horticulture. It's really important for. So although it's not large, it can be really important where we need a reliable and secure source. The quality of recycled water will very much depend on the waste stream. So, treated effluent versus industrial wastewater, what's the different contaminants that are in those different streams. And for example, if we think of the eastern side of Melbourne, the recycled water on that side has less salts than the recycled water on the western side, just because there's more industrial, more factories on the west side. So recycled water will require different management practices depending on the contaminants. And we have some very strong regulations and guidelines around what we can and can't do. And as I mentioned earlier, there's people looking all the time at what some of these new contaminants are emerging. And I think the framework that I showed for use of recycled water just helps us to understand the feasibility of a scheme and what might be some of the blockers to getting a scheme up, or what people might be concerned about in thinking about whether they really want to access that recycled water. And as I mentioned earlier, I think some of those barriers have changed very much over the last 10 to 15 years. And I expect that will continue to evolve over time. So I think that's it for me. I might stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much, Anne-Maree. Very nice presentation and very welcome contribution to this session. So I open the floor for discussions, and I see that actually there is already a question from Menakshi. Great presentation. What do you think will push us over the line for potable recycling?
I think the only answer to that is another drought. I think there's no reason why we shouldn't be moving towards potable recycling, but there are some policy no-go zones in some places, and I think it's really going to take a little while to shift the community and the politics around it, but a good drought will do that. So I think Queensland, we're very close to it. Or they might even be doing it now, but some of the other states will be a fair way behind.
Indeed. Do you also, could you maybe based on your experiences, tell us what your thoughts about what Australian experience could mean for India?
I think the Australian experience that's relevant is some of the guidelines that we've developed, but also the practical side of those guidelines. Like, you know, we know that high salinity is going to impact on production. So what's the important things that we need to focus on? I wouldn't suggest overlaying, you know, all of our regulatory requirements in India as a sort of, it wouldn't necessarily be helpful, but I think there's some really practical things that we can apply in the Indian context. And even though that framework I mentioned was quite, you know, it looks complicated, it can be transferred to any country jurisdiction. I actually did supervised a PhD student at Melbourne Uni, and she used that framework for some examples in India. So could pull that example out if you're interested.
Yeah, thank you. That's very useful. Alok Mayor has a question on what measures has been undertaken for long-term safeguarding of the community health.
So in Australia, I would say that our health department have been very conservative and very involved in the development of the legislation and the guidelines for what can and can't be do. So having said that, there's always contaminants that are emerging that we don't necessarily know the impact of. So I feel fairly confident that there has been good assessment, but you know, there will be emerging contaminants over time. Sorry, that's my dog barking. So.
Okay. The previous speaker, Lakshmi Rao, asks you, what are your comments on E. coli levels in treated wastewater, and what is the acceptable level?
Sorry, that was the question on E. coli?
Yes, that's the question, E. coli. What are the current levels in the treated water?
Class A, B, C, D, there's standards around E. coli levels. And so it can't meet the different classes unless it meets those log reductions of E. coli. So I think if we look at, if people are interested in looking at the class A, B, C, D, it gives very clear requirements for E. coli levels.
Okay, and there is a similar direction up on the salinity issue. What is the current practice to remove salt from the wastewater?
So we do have a lot of osmosis. Reverse osmosis is probably the big one for the big schemes. And then on farm, it's really is about leaching salts through. And that can be a challenge on some of the less permeable soils. So, yeah.
Yeah. Roger Peckham has also an interesting question relating the previous presentation. Could such a scheme as has been presented for Bangalore operate in Australia under our guidelines? What's your evaluation of that?
Could the Bangalore scheme operate in Australia under our guidelines? I'd have to have a better look at the at all the contaminants and the nitrogen, phosphorus, and E. coli, but potentially, yeah. Did Roger have a reason why, or that he thinks it might not?
If I can ask a follow-up question, Anne-Maree, I think it depends upon what kind of treatment was given in all those 3 case studies, I suppose. So what was the treatment in those 3 case studies?
So a lot of them is UV and reverse osmosis. In like the Werribee example was UV largely, and then reverse osmosis, and then to reduce the salinity again, it was shanding with better quality water.
Yeah, if that is the case, I don't think the Bangalore project would meet the Australian guidelines, because the Bangalore project is only secondary treatment. There's no tertiary treatment there.
Yeah. Good. I think this is a nice point to finish this discussion. Thank you very much again, Anne-Maree Boland. Great presentation and contribution. And after so much listening, I think it's time for you to start talking. And so Karen will introduce the next step of our webinar here, our exchange program.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, a great point. It's we would love to hear from everybody, from all the participants. So we're going to move into our breakout room discussions. So you'll be asked 2 questions in the in the breakout rooms. One's about the challenges and opportunities for research in wastewater reuse management and sustainability, and not just research, but also training and capacity building. The second question is about how we can grow and sustain collaboration between Australia and India in this area, and that might involve researchers, government, the private sector, NGOs, and others. So you're going to be automatically allocated to a breakout room. In a moment, something will pop up on your screen, and you need to accept the invitation. So I think what you need to do is scroll down to find your name and click join on the screen. And I think we've got about 20-25 minutes in our breakout rooms, and then you'll automatically be transferred back to the main room. So the breakout rooms have popped up on my screen. If you're not in room 1 and 2, you could probably see, but if you need to, you might need to scroll down to find that you're in another room. So please join, and moderators, could I remind you to all please press the record button in your session. We'll see you all in about 25 minutes.
All right, before we start, can I get everyone just to go around and give a brief introduction themselves to the group, please? And if you're comfortable turning on your camera so we can see you, I understand if it's not possible. Thippeswamy, would you like to start and unmute yourself? I can't hear you yet. You must be muted. Please check your unmute your microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I was in Bangalore Water Supply and Sewerage Board for all my career of 35 years plus, and now I am working as a consultant. My point is, basically we are discussing on usage of wastewater for agriculture. Of course, there are many usages apart from agriculture. I think my interest is that, see, particularly on cities, the demand for water in Indian scenario is more than, of course, no doubt agriculture is one of the important factors, but at the same time, drinking water for this, most of the cities and towns, particularly megacities, and situation is highly alarming. I think the potential of resources are very limited now, and the cities are growing, and in particular I am talking about Bangalore city. So in this context, I think we should also really look at how this wastewater should be utilized for say drinking purpose, and to followed by, I mean, non-potable use followed by potable use. That is my main context. Of course, the other towns may also need this water. I think what Mr. Lakshminarayana has presented today, I think it is true that they also need water, but at the same time, we really have to look at resources, because Bangalore city really needs this wastewater as one of the important resource for its sustainability. So I am of the opinion that the wastewater in Bangalore city, which is almost 1,500 million liters of water, need to be looked at potentially to non-potable use followed by potable use. That is my serious thinking. No doubt, the Kolar, adjoining towns and cities, basically what he has quoted today is Kolar, which is of course that place. But at the same time, even adjoining the towns like Ramanagaram, Chikkaballapur, etc., they are also demanding, they are also, the plans are being making that to have a similar projects to be implemented for them to do. So, but in the instance case, what I'm seriously looking at is, let us look at how to use this water for drinking, for non-potable use, and of course, gradually we should look at a potable use. That is seriously, I am going to present subsequently now at 12 o'clock, the scenario of Bangalore city. But if you look at the scenario of all the mega cities in India, I think the situation is highly alarming. I think even Delhi is also facing a water shortage, in spite of having very good resources like Yamuna and Ganga, etc. Similarly, Chennai, you must have read many times, this is also facing real problems of water scarcity. And of course, Calcutta is the one which is not, they come out with any problems of water shortage, but even Bombay is also has criticality in water resource. So now everybody is thinking in terms of using for recycled water for drinking purpose. Of course, many cities have already embarked on non-potable use, but now we are seriously thinking of using I will show you a project when I am making a presentation, which we have trying to do for indirect potable use for Bangalore city. So in continuation of what Mr. Lakshminarayana said, we are purchasing this water from Water Resources Department for having uptaking the raw water for further treating and pushing to Bangalore city. So it doesn't mean that we are not getting it at the free cost. That is one point. Second important point is, so we also have to See, we are pumping, we are treating, pumping, and again, treating and pumping for them. This is at a huge cost. No doubt, government of Karnataka is partly, they are giving a lot of funding for them. But at the same time, if these institutions like BWSCC has to sustain, I think we need to generate revenues. And I think without those revenues, if everything is given free of cost to Kolar farmers, I think nothing, the institutions will collapse. I think that is my main issue. One. Second is, no doubt, after some time, right now we are discharging that at free of cost. But at the same time, we are going to reuse this water, because today Bangalore city has almost 800 square kilometers of area, and it is still going. They are extending to 1,200. So in this, there is a lot of development that is happening. Where are we getting water? I think Bangalore city is one city where we are 3,000 feet above sea level. That is 980 meters above sea level. I think we don't have a perennial source. I think that is one of the reasons we should seriously think of using this water for whatever. Of course, agriculture, industry, urban usage, etc. All that is there. I think recharging aquifer is all there. But we are mainly looking at using for potable reuse. That is one thing.
All right.
I think that is what I would like to.
Very good. Thank you. Yes, that's a very extensive answer. Thank you. Can I ask anybody else if they'd like to, or you've made some key points, just record the key points and report back to the group when we finished in 15 minutes. Is anybody interested in doing that? Okay, there's no volunteers. If not, I'll ask Thippeswamy, maybe you could make some key points when we come back to the larger group. Would that be okay, sir?
Sure.
Sure. Okay, can I hear from somebody else? Would you like to talk about what you see as the challenges or the opportunities related to wastewater reuse? You'd like to add your own examples or your experience? Yes, Dr. Vivek, would you like to make some points?
Can you hear me?
Yes. No, it's not very clear.
Yeah, hello. To maintain the water quality after the treatment. And second one is acceptability of social pupils, our societies, etc. And main thing is before treatment of water quality and after the treatment of water quality, maintain the both issues and acceptance of the society to reuse the wastewater.
Yes, it's an interest. So the social acceptance, that's also been an issue with both India and Australia, I understand. Yes. Thank you. It's a big hurdle to overcome. Yes, thank you. Somebody else like to add what they see as some challenges and also opportunities? Okay, well, we have 12 minutes remaining. How about we look at the second question? How do we initiate? And what we've heard is some really good examples from both Bangalore and from Victoria in Australia. How do we initiate and sustain this collaboration, sharing of information and case studies with research, with the training or capacity building? Do you have any thoughts on that, how we can continue to share? This is one example today. How else can we initiate and sustain this sharing of information? You could also write in the chat box as well if you've got a thought or an opinion or an example. That would also be very valuable to hear.
Regarding the presentation from Australian representative for 3 wastewater treatment plants supplying to agriculture, I think see what is the cost at which they are selling for these, for example, this grape gardens if they are supplying from Adelaide. I think, see what is there uniform cost, or is there a different type of tariffs for agriculture when they are supplying to them? And of course, it was reported, she has informed that the process technology that was done for supplying to agriculture is RO. RO is the treatment, ultimate treatment that they are doing. I think, is it not very costly? At the same time, whether this same cost is transferred to the agriculturist is something we should know.
Yes, yes, it's a very good point. And it's interesting when Anne-Maree was talking about those examples.
Yeah.
The program really developed because of severe drought, similar to what, you know, when there's a big demand, that's what led to it. And it's timing's worked out well and it's continued on. But yeah, and farmers do pay a cost for their use of that water. I'm not sure how it compares. It isn't as much as other irrigation water, but there is a cost.
Yeah, this is when you are going for RO, the cost is going to be quite high. So in that connection, I am say, is it the entire what cost is transferred to them, or is there any subsidies, etc.?
Yes, initially there was a cost, but that was borne by the government department. So there was some initial, and also some farmers were setting up on their own in their towns as well. So some of the larger farmers who had the infrastructure were setting up. And again, when you have a 10-year drought, which is what we've all experienced, it sort of leads to that demand. And it's the opposite now. It's quite a wet season we're having here, so it's a good time at the moment. But yeah, there will be another drought in years to come.
Incidentally, I was responsible for installing the plant at Koramangala Chalagatta Valley for from where this water is supplied to the Kolar different tanks. And incidentally, there's a secondary treatment which I was supervised in 2006-07, and ultimately that is now that water is. So actually, there is still some lacuna in terms of treatment. I think some advanced treatments are necessary. I think even Lakshminarayana said that there is no heavy metals, but is not still proved in total. I think that is something needs to be monitored on a regular basis and see that whether there is these heavy metals still persists or not. I think that is one of the points. And other parameters, see, right now there are not much of standards are there in India in terms of quality of water supplied to the agriculture. So better they should follow standards of some either Australia or some developed country where, see, those standards may be incorporated temporarily till such time we have our own standards, and meet those standards when we supply water to the agriculturist. Otherwise, this may lead into a lot of complications, because immediately we will not know the implications, but gradually we will come to know, because after using that water for a long time, I think impacts will come only after that. I think whether it is heavy metals or higher organic matter, etc., etc. So I strongly feel that monitoring mechanism should be very robust, and secondly, they should also try to do it on a regular basis, right from beginning to the end of the supply. Yeah.
Yes, monitoring, ongoing monitoring. Yes, that's a really good point. And also the standards too. Dr. Tarun made a point about social acceptance, and that's a really good point, because initially, same in Australia. So has anybody got any thoughts about how we can improve social acceptance? I know you can give examples, but what other ways is it possible to help people improve their acceptance of using recycled water?
No, social acceptance in terms of using for drinking water is a problem, but social acceptance for people to use in rural areas of this water is not a big problem, because see, out of the 100, maybe 5 or 10 people, little knowledgeable people may be against, but 95 people are going to accept, because when there is no water, something this water is available and they can make their earnings for their livelihood. That is the main issue. So in that connection, I think, but only in terms of drinking water supply, I think we need to make awareness campaigns, and that is very, very important. See, if at all we are going for drinking water. So even that quality of water has to be monitored. So very rigorously before it is supplied, and see what has been done in Singapore and what has been done in Brisbane, what has been done in other part of the world. See, we should take care of those things very meticulously, and then we should go in for supplying water, because water is going to be very, very scarce for the potable.
Yes, that's a very good point. And I like the idea. Examples also help. Dr. Vivette, did you have a point to make for that, social acceptance?
Water quality issues, and acceptance is very much challenging.
Yes, yeah, it's a long ongoing campaign. Yes, yes. So I see. I have another point here. Rural area people and industry also resist to accept recycled water where pure water is available at low cost. That's an interesting point too. There you're weighing up the awareness and understanding, and also the costs. So that's a really important point. It's I like the point of sharing examples where it does work. Awareness campaign helps. And what other way? Where would you do awareness campaigns? How does that happen? How do you, is it information word of mouth or radio, or how do you share your information to get this awareness campaign?
No, incidentally, I think there are many welfare associations, there are many CBOs, there are many NGOs, there are many other organizations, private organizations, through which we have to inculcate this awareness campaign, regularly go and present. And even in what is done in developer countries is that, see, they go on a campaign with mobile units and take up campaigning on the awareness of not only in terms of using this type of wastewater for drinking purpose, but also in terms of creating awareness and the efficiency of managing the water. So all these things are still possible through media, through paper, through so many these things. I think we had to bring in that awareness, create more and more videos, circulate them, and now social media is in a big way. I think these are things we have to take a campaign, and particularly I think we need to organize meetings with the local people and several places, so that we have to tell them the reality of the present availability, how we have to conserve this water. At the same time, when we do this wastewater recycling for drinking purpose, what is that we can see, what are the impacts that are going to have, and how it is taken care of. So what is the quality that we are going to supply? Is it the quality of BIS standard, Bureau of India standard, does it meet or even more than that? So all these things can be campaigned. I think deliberated and tell the people that you need not be worried about, we are going to supply this quality of water.
Yeah, that's good. And it's being upfront with that information. And yeah, you've talked about various ways of video, social media, meetings with local people. Yes, talk about the impacts and the management. And also you made the point about if you have monitoring, that way you have good information that can be shared. So when you are sharing information, it's valid and it's up to date. Very good. We've only got less than 2 minutes to go. Would anybody else like to make a point about the challenges, the opportunities, or how we improve or continue the collaboration with sharing stories? Okay, and if you do have a point you'd like to in the chat box as well, because that is all recorded. All this is getting recorded, plus anything you put in the chat box also gets recorded. So also any questions that you have. So with our 1 minute 20 to go. Okay, all right. I'm going to start wrapping up now. Thippeswamy, you're happy to do the presentation back to the group of our discussions and the points that we've made, yourself and Dr. Vivek?
Yeah, I will do that. I think you can make these points to the jury. I think they let them answer these points, and of course I am going to make my points in the after this.
Oh, you're in the Oh, you're also, yes, you're in the open forum. Yes, I see that now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, I'll aim to make the points, and if I don't add what you think I've missed out. So yes, I appreciate. Oh, we're really lucky to have you all to ourselves. Thank you, Thippeswamy. All right. So that's 15 seconds left. You'll get this thing on your screen shortly where you'll be asked to join back to the main group.
Yeah.
And thank you all for your time and your input.
And before we start, let's do a bit of a short introduction. My name is Dharma Hagare. I'm from Western Sydney University. I work in reuse of recycled water and urban water systems. Roger.
Oh, I'm Roger Packham. I'm at Western Sydney University as well. You'll have to forgive me. I'm recovering from COVID at the moment, so I'm not all that bright. But I'm a founding member of the Marvi project and worked for about more than 10 years now in Rajasthan and Gujarat.
Thank you. Professor Tanu.
So good afternoon there and good morning here. I'm Tanu Jindal from MIT University. I work basically in recycled water sewage treatment plants in the decentralized basis and also into the water quality, including the POPs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Rohitash Kumar, Dr. Rohitash Kumar.
My name is Professor Rohitash Kumar. I am from Seri-Kashmir University of Agriculture, Science and Technology, Srinagar, Kashmir. And currently I am with Western Sydney University. I am working on surface hydrology and hydraulic modeling, then groundwater hydrology and irrigations. So these are my field of interest area.
Okay, thanks very much. I don't think we need to listen to Dr. Rao's introduction. We already heard about him.
Yeah, I think
I think let's start with the first question. The first question is, what are the key challenges and opportunities related to wastewater reuse in research, training, and capacity building for Australia and India for the next 5 to 10 years? So who wants to start first?
As per my opinion, there are a few challenges. First one is need to calculate energy consumptions, means what technology we have to use so that it is cheaper and it can be easily adapted. Then there is another challenges as footprint and facilities. Then dealing with sludge. Then another, I think Professor Rao already mentioned some challenges with how we measure impact, long-term impact of this one. So these are different challenges we need to care and resolve that one.
Yeah. Okay, so that's good.
I asked the question about would the Bangalore project operate in Australia, simply to highlight the difference at the moment in regulations in the two areas. And I wonder if that's going to become an increasing issue in India at all. I don't know if it will or it won't, but I hope it doesn't, because I think the sort of scheme that you're doing is an ideal one.
Dr. Rao, you want to comment on that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the major debates which are happening, Professor Roger, as to what should be the extent of treatment that you want to give for such indirect. See, it's very clear. It's not direct use of water. It's very clear. Every tank which is filled, there are multiple signboards to tell to people, don't drink this water, don't bathe in this water, don't directly come in contact with water. Let the water percolate through Mother Earth, and then you pick up that water. And we see that the water which is coming in from the borewells are close to drinking water standards. The water which is there in the open dug wells, which are nearby, are close to drinking water standards. And it is not, except for E. coli. E. coli remains there because it depends upon what is the contaminant that you have, even in the pipes which you are picking up the water from. Except for those, all other standards are okay. They meet drinking water standards. So you pick up the water, boil it and drink. You pick up the water and do a small disinfection and drink. So this is what is going on in India right now, at least in the Kolar part. Now the big question is, do I tertiary treat this water, put it through an RO system and then put it? So my cost will go up by 5 times. If I do that, is it worth doing it? And then this water remains in open tanks wherein it is prone to more contamination. You have bird droppings, you have rodents, you have snakes, you have all kinds of stuff. It's a living system, and then you can't have, RO treated water in these tanks. It makes no sense. No fish grows in RO treated water. So what are you going to do? So it's a big question which we are debating and trying to find answer for. And that can be a question relevant to Australian case as well. So how do you determine water qualities for indirect groundwater recharge? That is one. Second question is, now we are removing nutrients. We're spending a lot of money removing nutrients from water. Nitrogen is coming down to less than 10. Phosphorus is less than 1. And then we are adding more fertilizers when this water is being used. Is there a way to conserve these nutrients without spending energy? You know what I mean? So you remove it at one place, make it into a sludge, and then you add nutrient when you want to grow vegetables and fruits in agriculture. So is there a better way of managing it without putrefying your tanks? I don't know if it is possible, but that's a tough question.
I think these are questions for Australia as well.
I think nutrients should be okay. I think the issue is some of the micropollutants like heavy metals and maybe pesticides. There may be traces of pesticides there. Other pharmaceuticals and other residues which might have an impact, I suppose. That needs to be taken into account, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say that endocrine disruptors also and antibiotics. Plus, the main sewage waste is from metro cities where it is overpopulated. So I would say that, from the sewage waste is a huge problem. So decentralization and sending the water to the parks, that can be solution rather than taking it for drinking water, because taking a pipeline to the agriculture area for irrigation can be little more expensive and tricky also, how to transport that all water which has been treated. So we have been working and thinking continuously on decentralized wastewater treatment plant and new societies which are coming up, urban societies, housing societies which are coming up. They have full-fledged solid waste and sewage waste management systems. So we can develop it in the colonies with the help of RWAs and also CSR, and also with some support, some government. I think decentralization is the only option with the participation of public.
It'll be good to have.
And we can also install soft.
Yeah, go on, Professor.
Softeners instead of RO system. Softeners can be used in some places which are not that expensive, and it can also take a huge amount of load. Besides that, the forward osmosis membrane systems also can be utilized rather than reverse osmosis. So these are some of the solutions we can think of.
Yeah, low cost technologies, I suppose. Yeah. Okay, I think we've got a few points here. So I think let's move on to the second question, and then if there's a time remaining, we can come back there. So how do we initiate and sustain significant collaboration between Australia and India for research, training, and capacity building in wastewater reuse? Discuss this with regard to engagement with researchers, NGOs, public and private sector. So how do you think that we can achieve this collaboration? So I want to go first.
We can propose a workable project, for example, the points which we have discussed, we can jot down a project and then propose a project under the viable scheme under India, Australia. So that is the way we can come work together. Secondly, by academic exchange visits, visiting option. Dr. Rotash is there, so he would in Western Sydney. So that way we can do. Thirdly, we can have some joint conference together or training together. So these three are the things where we can raise our points and aware people and make some concrete recommendations for further course of action.
I picked up that there were a lot of students involved in this project, research students, presumably doing PhDs and masters. And it seems to me there'd be an opportunity if there was some cross-pollination between Australian researchers, students doing masters and PhD with their counterparts in India, even if it was only through short seminars and discussions of what projects they're doing and how they're doing it. So they get to know each other at an early stage.
So that's collaborating on specific projects.
Yeah, well, yes, not necessarily specific projects, just sharing what they're doing and having discussions with each other. So taking the opportunity to link the university's training directly through Zoom and other technologies.
So like virtual engagement, I suppose,
running short seminars, on a fortnightly basis or a monthly basis, where different students present what they're doing and why they're doing it and answer questions.
That's a great idea. I think I agree. I think having some kind of seminars managed by students or the students who are involved in this project, students and postdocs who are involved in these projects, if they come and share their learnings, share their questions, share their discussions, it would be very nice. And also, as what Professor Tanu said, explore all options of collaborative research, either joint proposals, exchange of students, exchange of even professors, academicians, so that we have cross-pollination of ideas, and then we learn from each other's success stories and mistakes.
It will also get people to know each other at the beginning of their research careers, and that's when friendships are formed and people keep cooperating.
Yes. Agreed.
Yeah, Professor Dharma.
Yeah.
I think in addition of this one, we can collaborate with from both country, industry, NGO also. I think it would be also very good collaborations and the need to study of different city taking as a case study. So it would be a very good initiative. So I think
NGO involvement of NGOs, I think is important, I suppose, especially Indian point of view. I think there are a lot of NGOs work in India.
NGO and some industry also working on this one. So I think in respect of technology which they are using. So I think a collaboration of or need to from both countries.
There's there's quite a network in India of around water and sanitation and hygiene arising from a UN Habitat project that was operating about 10 years ago now. I did a final review of it for UN Habitat, and there were projects all around India and quite a strong network of people. And I think many of them would have been interested in what was presented today if we could link into that network.
So that's the highlighting the existing case studies and then the collaborating on those case studies, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, and tapping into existing networks as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, in terms of the funding, what do you guys think? How do you think? I think a lot of these collaborations need funding, I suppose. So how do we tap funding, and where do we get the funding? So, any thoughts on that?
Well, it's a big question.
It's a big question, I know. Yeah.
I think good projects will attract the funding, particularly where you have the sort of outcomes that I saw for the Bangalore project. I've often visited Bangalore, and I'm aware how drought stricken some of those surrounding areas were. So this is very impressive. Yeah. It's not far from Bangalore too. There's a groundwater project run by Sri Satya Sai Baba organisation. They took drinking water around, I believe, in somewhat similar way.
That's in Whitefield, I think, Dr. Rao?
No, it was an Anantapur district.
No,
not that one.
not that one. No.
I think there are a lot of NGOs working in the water area, I suppose.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of bringing all of them together.
There are a lot of small groups working on water and sanitation and stuff like that. But as you said, bringing them together becomes important. Yeah.
Also, we can tap the industry who are into sewage treatment plants, ETPs. We can also write to them for coming with us on the project and working on specific issues. For example, the waste from kitchen, they are too greasy. So how to having such filter systems and different kinds of issues like sludge. Dr. Rotash has mentioned already. So coming up with a solution, like, as I said, energy efficient STP plant, because sometimes when electricity goes, they are not working. So can also generate biogas generated, electricity. So we can tap those industries who are into STPs, and they would have a good business in India because of the huge sewage waste. So those can be approached for funding our project.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Probably going back to our first question, if you're looking at, say, 10 years time, so in 10 years time, what would be the key major issues for Australia and India in terms of reuse?
So as we have been discussing, in 10 years, the population will increase further. The sewage waste will automatically increase, and because of the global warming and climate change, glaciers are melting, rivers would be, having less water, and because of the pollution, the groundwater sources have already, been contaminated, and they are hardly of any use for drinking purpose. Similarly, so are our rivers. So these are the biggest challenges: maintaining the quality as well as the resource. So these two things are the biggest challenge in view of global warming and climate change, as glaciers are melting and floods are coming, and so we really need to do water resource management in view of the global warming, climate change, in view of urbanization, in view of a huge population load, in view of I would say, we should take care with the latest technologies. Save every drop, every drop, is precious, and sensitizing people about its, proper use. The different technologies, different taps are coming where are fitted in malls and restaurants, which automatic sensors are there where they stop, and there are sprinkler systems in the taps. So such kind of schemes can become so that we can then there are also an irrigation system, also more crop per drop. So sensor should be there that how much is required by the soil and the plant, only that much should be irrigated. So many technologies can be involved. So these are down the line in 10 years, having proper, like Israel is doing very good in this. They are managing water resources.
So we need
down the line in 10 and also giving incentive to the people, like as Dr. Roger said that it can be a resource of income, waste treatment, so if that incentive can be given to the people, so they will contribute, the compost form can be given for their kitchen gardens, and water treated can be given for watering their plants. So incentivization of whole system has to be thought and planned to take care of.
It should be self-sustaining as well, I suppose, isn't it? But some of these reuse projects, reuse projects require a lot of investment.
I think
how do we generate income?
Yeah, I think going in the
so RWAs must be involved in it, so that people take care of their own waste. They should not depend on the government to take care of our waste.
I mean, the cost seems to have been covered by finding a use for the wastewater. I presume that was a problem getting rid of that wastewater before it was pumped out to these villages. So it's a circular, we're moving to a circular economy, aren't we?
Yeah, that's right. Circular economy of nutrients. Dr. Rao, I think your audio is breaking.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that, recycling, large-scale recycling will become a reality. So we have to now brace up to how do we handle that? So this is going to become a reality. Even recycling at the decentralized level. So Bangalore, for example, is moving towards selling water for all construction purposes. So they are saying all construction activity should be done with recycled water coming in from treated water coming in from apartments. So that is decentralized wastewater available for construction activities. So this is going to become a reality. So we have to brace for challenges associated with reuse of treated water. Quality, quantity, price, acceptability, all these issues have to be addressed.
So use of
sustainability,
non-portable use.
Yeah, mostly non-portable use to begin with, but maybe towards portable use in the next maybe 15 years. I don't know.
I think we've got only about 20 seconds left. So for India, I think needs a lot of investment in infrastructure. So how do you think India will be able to generate that investment?
Okay, well, we've got a group of experts here, absolutely. So I am moderating this discussion, and I think a lot of us do know each other, but we will go and have an intro. My name's Ricky Spencer. I'm at Western Sydney University. My background is in river health, river biodiversity, and citizen science as well. So I'll hand it over to Okke.
Thank you, Ricky. My background is not really in wastewater. I'm more a groundwater person. The closest that I come to wastewater in my work at Flinders University is working on an MAR scheme where it's more, actually, it's not really wastewater, it's stormwater, but potentially the same system could be used. Yep.
And Basad?
Yeah, thank you, Ricky. So I think I know everyone, but I'll just say my interest is anything to do with water or sustainability. So I'm happy.
Alok.
Hello, I am Anu Kumar. I am currently working as Central Pollution Control Board at Delhi, India. My background is development of for drinking water and wastewater treatment.
Thank you. And Anne-Maree, who we just saw, give a wonderful talk.
Yeah, so background in, well, I guess, agriculture. Sorry?
That's all right. He's gone on mute, I think. So, yeah.
Oh, okay. Background in agriculture and sustainable practices, and worked with Basant on some recycled water over the years. Yeah.
And Archie, did you want to? Are you?
Thank you, Ricky. I've got my video off because of some internet issues.
Yep.
But I am interning. My name is Archit. I'm interning with the Australian Institute. I'm a student at the University of Melbourne studying sustainability. So it's great to be a part of these discussions and listen to all of the great work that's already happening out there. And today in this room, I'm just going to be here for some admin support and to listen into the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, can I hand it to you to report back and take notes? Would it be possible to do that for this room?
I could, but maybe Alok would, because
Alok, would you like to? Absolutely, that would be wonderful.
It will be my pleasure, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, great.
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for that. So the first question that we're delving into, I think I'm going to get Anne-Maree to start this one, following on from your talk around the key challenges and opportunities related to wastewater reuse. And I think, obviously from some of the discussion that we had after your talk, the challenges, I guess, potentially between Australia and India, I think that could be quite diverse in terms of and around regulations too. So did you want to jump into that discussion first?
Yeah, so in the key challenge in Australia, I think, is what we touched on, that the value of recycled water sort of dips in and out depending on whether we have a drought or not. So that's the policy can change over time, which doesn't give certainty to people about how important recycled water is. And then for India, it's really about how strict those regulations are and the monitoring of the contaminants, and so it's probably the broader infrastructure around applying what can and can't be measured, and making sure that it is safe and doesn't degrade the land. So I think, yeah, sorry.
I totally agree with Anne-Maree. I went to that site a couple of years ago, visited the area, and I think big issue is the human health, in my view. Some of the people are using groundwater from the wells recharged with this treated wastewater for drinking, and they have no idea what's going to happen. So I think that needs to be really looked at, and that's where I think collaboration between Australia and India could be worthwhile. In terms of wastewater reuse, it is whether you do or not, it is happening. So it's better to be regulated and done in an informed way, so the risk is minimized to people, environment, the water bodies, and so on. And it is a big issue, going to be a very big issue in the coming years, because these big cities are producing a lot of wastewater and it's just running, either contaminating rivers or groundwater, and people are just using sometimes raw wastewater using for vegetables, growing fresh vegetables, and people are eating, and you can smell from fresh vegetables what they're in there. So it's a big issue. And I think that's where, if we can develop some sort of study, it could be very well supported by Indian government and from Australian government, and like that.
I just quickly jump in. Which countries do it well presently, and why do they do it? As in, are they is water scarcity the biggest issue that's driving it, and is this a last resort in terms of water recycling? So, which countries would you say do it well, and what proportion of their drinking water would be going back in from wastewater?
I think California, it's not a country, but
yeah,
almost is.
It pretty much is, yeah.
They do it well, and they have very tight regulations, but I think it still is driven through scarcity. But now with the circular economy closing the loop, perhaps that's a driver that is going to change, just using resources efficiently.
Also, Israel might be another country. They also reuse a lot of wastewater.
Sorry, which country did you say?
Israel.
Israel, okay.
Yes, that's what I wanted to mention also,
yeah.
Certainly. But there, of course, also one of the driving factors has been always the limited availability. But I think your point, Anne-Maree, is very important. Probably the stability in terms of policy is very, very important to make it a success, because most of those things require long-term investments, and they're only going to be made if industry, because in this case it's a lot of industry that is needed, is willing to invest in that.
Look, did you have a comment?
Yes, sir. I would like to add some social issues, sir. The key challenges I'd point out that this regulatory norms or policies frame warming. Apart from that, we have to educate this common people who are the ultimate user of this recycled water. Because as per my experience in India, we have a very good aesthetic value in water. So if you say that this water is coming from the sewage or sewage treatment plant and this is a reuse, so nobody is going to use it. Even for washing your utensils, nobody is going to use that. So we have to train this and educate this common people to, and we have to see this acceptability of this treated wastewater for use. So that's the point I want to highlight.
I think that's a really good point around educating people, because it took probably 20 years of educating the Australian communities that the recycled water was safe, or crops that were grown with recycled water was safe, and the regulation was to a high standard to make sure it was safe. And now I don't see anyone too worried about it these days, but it did take some time.
I wonder if there's a way, so California, for example, are they doing it on a broad scale? So as in, are they treating the water going into their main dams or main water supply, or are they doing it at local, regional levels where the water storage is occurring? I could see it potentially working in Australia, maybe not, let's say in Sydney at least, and saying, all right, we're going to treat it and put it into Warragamba Dam, but any new suburbs could actually take the Warragamba Dam water, have a treatment within these new suburbs, have that development, and just do it locally first, and then potentially, hang on, we're not creating mutants and people aren't dying. That maybe that's a way going forward to potentially embed it in new suburbs that are as part of that regulation.
So it has been in, like, for third pipe, just in urban irrigation, but not for drinking.
Yeah, I thought maybe, the grey water, that sort of stuff, as well as the purple pipe. But
yeah,
for the drinking water, actually, could you start doing it at the local level, at the local storages and that sort of thing? But,
I don't think any politician
Yeah.
is going to go there when there's no need at the moment. And I think also, if you remember back 15 years ago, then all the desal plants came in.
Yeah.
And that was probably a more palatable to most people.
Yeah,
I think in Australia it will take a while to direct treated wastewater for potable use. Indirect is possible. It's happening in Hawkesbury, for example, through Hawkesbury River.
Yeah.
But
actually in Perth, there is a good example where they went a lot further and where they actually use wastewater now after treatment. Of course, it's injected in aquifers, and it's accepted by the population now. They went through an extensive process of communication and community involvement, but they are at that stage that it is accepted.
So that's indirect again, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, it's indirect, and it's injecting the fully treated wastewater. It's pretty clean before it goes into the aquifer. It has quite a long residence time before you later pump it up, but still it has this stigma, of course, that it was at one point in time it was wastewater.
And is it so? I mean, it still has a stigma at that point where.
I think people are now in Perth. I think they have convinced population that it is okay and that they are fine with it. But it has cost them quite a bit of effort to get that implemented. Certainly.
So,
but
I mean,
is
it
an expensive scheme? I think fourth one.
It's a very expensive scheme. Yes.
Whether every city can do like this, even in Australia.
Yeah, that's a big question. Yeah.
How does it equate to the costs to running desal plants? I guess that would be the equivalent that you'd be looking at. Yeah. Because they're very expensive to run. And energy not that efficient really. So. So I guess in looking at the time, I guess we're kind of moving into the next question. It's really interesting, I guess, particularly we've all kind of said when water is scarce and we go through those the boom and bust times in Australia, that it's only during that scarcity is driving at least discussion at that point rather than anything else. Is it driving collaboration? Is it then driving research dollars? Is it then driving, potentially implementation after the drought of what's been discovered, so that being applied and taken forward? Or does it just sit on, are they just PhD theses that are just sitting on shelves because we don't want to discuss it, at least in Australia, that view. I guess obviously we've had a focus around Australia at this point. I'd be interested from the Indian perspective in terms of, to a large extent, water doesn't have, when we talk about water scarcity, we're really talking about drinking water scarcity rather than just water itself. You may have a lot of water, but drinking water, if you can't treat it, that sort of thing properly, it still can be scarce. And I'm interested in, I guess, that potential between Australia and India in terms of, that solutions between high tech, but also, those potential lower tech solutions that can involve green infrastructure, those kind of things where you can, maybe have that, that wastewater, spend many years by the time it actually gets into the drinking water, going through those processes, that we can involve those type of things. I don't know if that's a way forward where you you set and forget it, and then you don't have to have that discussion of it directly going in. I probably said too much. Do you guys want to jump in and have a chat now? Yeah.
I think Ricky, you brought out a very important point. High tech requires investment and maintenance, and things can go wrong. Whereas natural green infrastructure like wetlands, for example, so at a small city level, if you can transfer wastewater to wetland to clean naturally, some goes to agriculture, some recharges, and some can be released into natural environment, or maybe groundwater, recharged groundwater can be reused also. So I think that's this. I see wetlands can play a very important role in cleaning wastewater and making it usable. And the second thing is the health regulation. It's very critical from how it is used for agriculture, what's impact for drinking. I think those things need to be sorted out. Otherwise, problem will multiply. And the drinking water is a critical one at the moment.
Absolutely.
So some people, I think Alok will confirm with me, some cities at the moment, they are getting water from a train, another place, probably 50 kilometers away by train, and people queuing up to get water. Or some places you get every alternate day, certain period of time, water to collect. So it's a critical issue. So
yes, sir, particularly in Maharashtra. Maharashtra, this Nanded area that is famous for this transportation of water through trains, and this supply of alternative water. So many water scarce parts in Rajasthan also, some parts of Odisha, Chhattisgarh, so many parts of India are facing the same problem of water scarcity.
Yes, so reuse will have an important sort of solution for water security for future. And I think two countries can collaborate in many ways.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think water security, developing that potentially to enhance your water security, I think that's something that both countries could certainly invest in, and that would be a way forward in terms of collaboration, but also developing collaboration, but also pushing the point, particularly for looking for grants and developing those kind of collaborations around water security. I think particularly we're seeing areas, it's not just, obviously we get Sydney focused, but areas like the Darling River, major food bowl, those sort of things, where that becomes really important, and utilising not just for drinking water, but for food, I think certainly becomes around that broader than water security at that point too, in terms of, heading into food security as well.
I'm not aware of this condition in Australia, sir. As per my understanding, this is the regulation, the policy and the regulation are very strict in Australia, sir. In India also we have the same regulation, but we are not following the strict norms, sir. Means people are not compliant, and government official are also lenient to obey this compliance. So the first challenge should be this: we should collaborate with Australian partners and learn how this gap between this policy frameworking and this real implementation is closed now. There should be minimum gap. I feel there is a strong gap, and India till now persisting. So through collaboration, that problem may be sorted out.
Good point. Absolutely. So we've got a couple of minutes left. Is there anything people would like to add to this point, to take back, I guess, as a message going forward from this room?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Bazan said. I think the health aspect, human health aspect, is extremely important, because if we use wastewater and we reintroduce it into environment and humans are affected, it can get a very bad reputation. And so that then we actually achieve probably the opposite of what we want. And so that is something that really has to get sufficient attention, rather less supply maybe, but at safe level than too much and accidents happen.
Are there regulations and standards in India for
yes,
yeah?
There are some regulations like my organization, the Central Pollution Control Board, has framed some guideline value like this. You can discharge norm for inland surface water or marine bed, but we are personally visiting the industries. They are not following it. On the document only, it has been written that we are following that. Some laboratory data they will show, but in practice, real practice, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think some regulations are there. Some probably doesn't make sense. Some require some modifications. So I think need more clarity implementation.
And the consequences of not following it are very clear in Australia. So yeah, there needs to be some consequence, I guess. Yeah.
You said, Anne-Maree, you mentioned California, they embraced it. How long ago, since they've really introduced it and like to a large capacity or a significant capacity in the water system, and has there been any issues? I guess we're not going to see. I guess we need to look long term for a lot of this. And has it been long enough to actually see have there been any issues?
Well, they were certainly before us, and probably 25 years ago they started that. And there was all of the pushback around, toilet to tap and very, very strong backlash. And I haven't heard recently of any issues. I mean, they've been irrigating vegetables in the Central Valley for a long time, but again, driven by water scarcity.
Yeah. But that's what you need, those long-term, like,
yeah.
I mean, that in a country that litigates for anything, that would be a perfect example for that. We've only got 10 seconds left, so thank you for the discussion, and lovely to meet everybody who I haven't met before.
Thank you, Ricky. Nicely chaired.
Yeah, thank you, Ricky.
Group, so we were lucky that we got a quite early input for his contribution, which he'll also offer later on. And I had the Vivek, so I had 2 other contributions. So he was talking about examples. So other examples, say in Delhi and Mumbai, that was also similar schemes, and talked about the technical side of that. So sharing information, this is a really good example of a start. He also talked about the monitoring, constant monitoring of these schemes and using that information to help people understand, and that relates to the awareness campaigns. So examples of awareness campaigns is regular up-to-date information, and that can be based on the monitoring. Using videos, so that's information where people can easily access. Social media, also meeting local people, so provide information, in a personal basis that helps people. Yes, and talking about the impacts and the management too. So again, that's a connection between monitoring, understanding the schemes that are happening, so you're providing valid, up-to-date information. And also the viability of the schemes too. That was an interesting point raised about talking about the points in Australian examples, how viable was it? And also that the question asked, how much do farmers pay for that water? I wasn't sure Anne-Maree added information, but that was a really interesting point we had. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Debbie, for that. So room number 2, Meenakshi, I think that's your room.
Yes, Karen, so we didn't nominate a reporter, so it might be me. So we had lots of discussion actually on all sorts of topics, but we also discussed that the monitoring in terms of the pathogenic risk and risk from contaminants of emerging concern is perhaps one of the top priority if we are going to move towards waste to potable reuse in future. even for non-potable reuse, the risk around plants uptake and then bioaccumulation and magnification through the tropical food chain. And we discussed about reluctance of water agencies to engage in discussions like this. It's water sector is quite a conservative sector, both in India and Australia, if I could say, and changing the way it's being managed over the years is not easy. And then you top it up with the community perceptions and the yuck factor associated with water recycling are some of the barriers. But as Anne-Maree said in the start, another drought perhaps might push us over the line to overcome some of those challenges, and legislation, of course. And we then went on to discuss briefly the second question about collaboration opportunities between India and Australia, and we recalled a few examples which have been successful to different extents between Australia and India. And some examples are joint PhDs with some of the chosen institutions in India, and it just ensures that academics are working together and it doesn't stop with PhD completion, it just then continues and you work on different problems in different areas. Mentoring schemes, Arch India came up as one of the good examples as well, and there are several other mentoring schemes. Young Border Professionals Training is a good example as well. And we talked about micro-credentialing and sharing the case studies. Though there is always a bit of caution that you can't utilize the framework developed for Australia directly in India and vice versa, but there are always good lessons to learn from case studies. So sharing perhaps has a lot of benefits. I'll perhaps stop there.
Thanks, Lakshmi, that's great. And yes, every time we have a workshop, we write to the participants and invite them to share their case studies so that we can promote them. So we'll be doing that again, and I hope we'll get some great case studies in. I think Dharma, you looked after room 3, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I'll just share quickly my screen. I think some of the issues I think we discussed are similar to the other groups. A couple of things here, the level of treatment and the guidelines, kind of developing evolving guidelines and standards. As we learn more about recycled water use, how do we improve those guidelines and how do we develop future guidelines? I think that's quite important, I suppose. And then I think the future is a decentralized wastewater treatment system. That's one point which was raised. Water saving devices, IoT technology to increase the efficiency. I think that's very important under the current climate change scenarios. Circular economy of water and nutrients. I think that will drive the future. The applications of recycled water reuse. I think these are similar to the other groups. I think one of the point which was raised was webinars managed by students and student-centered engagement between both the countries. That kind of engagement would benefit so a lot of young professionals who are sort of coming up in the near future. Thank you.
That's great.
Is there any other points the group members want to sort of contribute?
No, it's perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you very much, Dharma. And Ricky, I think you looked after room number 4.
Ma'am, on behalf of room number 4, I want to summarize.
Oh, wonderful, Alok. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. And our group has summarized that first the technical, first the key challenges is the framework, good policy framework. Australia has a very good policy framework in terms of water cycle, water reuse, but India don't have that stringent norms. We can learn from each other, and we can develop some guidelines. We can take examples of some good means good example. Some other countries like California and Israel, we can borrow that type of policy, and that's the foremost challenge. The second most challenge is the long-term assessment of this use of recycled water, particularly this on human health and other environmental components like groundwater or surface water contamination, because there is always a probability of cross contamination of this recycled wastewater with some clean environmental matrices. So that's the second challenge. So and third challenge is the cost benefit analysis. Like it's fine, technically it's feasible that we can plan a good system, but it should be technically feasible as well as economically beneficial. So not so that cost benefit analysis should be undertaken for a long-term project. And fourth most the challenge, the social acceptability or the education which will change the mindset of this common people to accept this applicability of this recycled wastewater, because ultimately they are the ultimate users who are the end users. So in India particularly, we have a mindset that don't use this water that is originated from the STPs or this water treatment plant. So that mindset should be changed, and we should need a good common community education should be developed in India particularly. So far as this second question is concerned, we should we have developed and we will go forward with this cooperation, mutual cooperation between India and Australia in terms of technical exchange. Like one example in Bangalore, like we have a very good managed system, but we can borrow some technical guideline as proposed in Victoria and something that to improve in our case and situation. And we should develop this policy, this minimization of gap between policy framework and implementation, particularly in India, through diplomatic dialogues between India and Australia. So that's the highlight from our group number 4.
Wonderful, thanks very much. I think that's really useful points there. Thanks everybody for that, the discussions and for the feedback, which we'll take on board. I'm now going to hand over to Okke, Professor Batelaan, who's going to introduce our open forum segment.
Thank you, Karen. And so welcome back. And everybody who has participated before in one of those workshops probably knows what is coming now. But if you're new, then we're moving into what we call the open forum, in which we have the 2 presenters from before, Dr. Boland and Rao, but also 2 additional persons, panelists, who will give an introduction to discussion, which we like to invite you in. And so we invite you to ask questions. But before that, we are going to hear first of those 2 panelists. So the first one I'd like to introduce is Mr. Thippeswamy, and he's a former chief engineer from the Bangalore Water Supply and Sewerage Board. And he worked for or on the Bangalore Water Supply and Sewerage Board for almost 35 years until he retired as a chief engineer in 2005. And then he has made himself very useful as an independent consultant in the capacity in which he advised many water-related projects for government, private organizations, including the campus wastewater reuse system for the Indian Institute of Science, such that hopefully those students get healthy and water and that is beneficial for their health also. Mr. Thippeswamy, I would like to invite you to give us your short statement and introduction to this topic of this workshop.
First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for providing me the opportunity to speak to you on the wastewater reuse management in Bangalore city. Perhaps what is just you have heard from Lakshminarayana Rao is about the wastewater generated by Bangalore city is being supplied to the neighboring district of Kolar for agriculture use. But see, what is the prevailing situation of water supply and wastewater in Bangalore is something which I am going to discuss. And basically, Bangalore city is one of the major metro city in India. I think the as of today, the geographical area of managing this water supply to Bangalore is almost 800 square kilometers, and we have a population of more than 1.12 million people. That's 1.2 crores of people in this region, and it is further expanding. I think what is most important is we are 3,000 feet above the sea level. We are 3,000 feet above the sea level, and getting water for this city from the other perennial sources is one of the greatest drawback, I think, difficulty in terms of bringing water to Bangalore city. See, this is the present, this one shows the area that is developed, I think 800 square kilometers of this area. Originally, it was only 240 square kilometers up to 2007, but today it is more than 800 square kilometers. So supplying water for these 12 million people is a gigantic task. We have two important resources for Arkavati and Kaveri. Important resources of Kaveri, Arkavati and Kaveri, but unfortunately Arkavati is again attributed to Kaveri, but unfortunately the Arkavati source is almost redundant, in the sense we are not getting any water from there. With the result, we are only depending on Kaveri source, from where we have implemented several schemes up to from stage 1 to stage phase 4, phase 1 and 2, and now we are going for stage 5. So in total, we are getting about 1,440 million liters of water only from Kaveri scheme. In addition, we are getting about roughly 500 million liters of water from groundwater. I think perhaps you are aware that groundwater potential, India is the largest extractor of groundwater in the world. I think Bangalore is also extracting large quantity of water, that is almost 500 million liters of water. And perhaps our latest report from Ministry of Government of India says the 20 cities are going to exhaust the potential of groundwater resources. So anyway, I think totally about 1,900 million liters, 1,950 million liters of water is being extracted, obtained from surface and groundwater. And we are generating about 1,500 million liters of sewage at the rate of 80% of water coming out of usage from various utilizers like residential, commercial, and industrial. So BWSSP at the same time has already installed 1,525 MLD capacity plants, which are already working. Next slide, please. This one, continue. So, see, the BWSSP has already installed 1,525 MLD capacity plants. These are all plants which capacity of, secondary treatment, and only 5 of them have a tertiary treatment, where we are supplying treated water to most of the non-potable water to the industries, and also to the many areas where, including airport, etc. I think, the main important thing that I would like to, even in addition to these 5 plants which are constructed by Bangalore Water Supply and Sewage Board, there are more than 2,600 decentralized sewage treatment plants which are installed by various installations by commercial and housing complexes, including, as I said, Indian Institute of Science, commercial complexes, etc., etc. I think this is one of the, they are treating almost 140 to 150 million liters of water in these 2,600 decentralized plants. So we are, of course, most of them are working. I think what reports I obtained from Pollution Control Board is that almost 25 to 30% are not functioning, but rest of them are functioning. But I will also show you these are now critical, because the availability of water in Bangalore city with 1,440 is inadequate. And because of the fact that we are almost 38 to 39% of wastages, losses in the system, and what really available is only only about 1,200. BWSSP, main reason for decentralized wastewater treatment are, see, our tariffs are very high. I think highest in the whole country, are probably almost equal to any developed country. So the tariffs are very high in for commercial and industrial tariff. BWS supplies even treated water for what has been said by Lakshminarayana just a few minutes back. And most importantly, we are also looking for, see, next please, next. This is one of the proposed plans for indirect potable reuse, what has been done in similar to, say, Singapore or Brisbane. I think this is very much called for, because we don't have any real resources in close by. I think we have exhausted the one perennial source of Kaveri, and we are now seriously looking for this sort of problem, I mean, this sort of solution, in the sense the wastewater which is generating from Vishwavati Valley is more than 500 million liters, from where we want to treat 150 million liters of water and bring it to Arkavati source, where the Thippeswamy source, which was also supplying water for Bangalore city till 1974. And we want to dilute and again treat it and send it to Bangalore city. This is the project which is almost approved by Government of India. Probably this is going to take a lead in the days to come. I think because the fact I have mentioned here, if you want to go for any additional resources from perennial source, we have to go almost 300 to 400 kilometers distance in order to get that. And also there is a lot of agitations going on to tap those from those places also. So we have to seriously look at wastewater is one of the important resource for augmenting water supply to Bangalore city. I think seriously considering that the wastewater which is generated, see what has been done in many other developed countries, we have to follow that, like Santiago, like Los Angeles, like Texas, they are going for direct potable use. Probably, in my opinion, days to come, I think we are seriously looking at not even indirect potable use, but we have to go for direct potable use. Next slide, please. Next slide. So here is a case where recently, I think what has been shown is, so just previous slide. So here, it is just a few days back, I think last week only, here is a case, apartments, recycled water being supplied to industries to get, I think they are treating one of the important apartment is treating to high standards with RO and selling this water to industry. I think, next please. So given the fact, I am just coming to way forward, the challenges before authority to meet the demand of water for growing population, no more perennial resource to augment water supply to city. That is exactly what it is meant for. I think we don't have any resources. What is next to be done? Authorities need to seriously think of using wastewater, which is black gold in Australia, for a potable purposes, either through direct or indirect potable use, similar to other developed countries like Singapore, Brisbane, Santiago, Texas, etc. There is no groundwater availability since the city has only rocky terrain. Using all forms of water is inevitable, such as grey water, storm water, and wastewater. Conservation of water and efficient management measures are need of the hour. Recovery of not only water but also untapped resources is a must, such as the energy from methane and phosphorus, and also to meet the circular economy. This is my remarks, and this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thippeswamy. Much appreciated this contribution. And so let's move to our next panelist, and that's Professor Howard Fallowfield. And Howard Fallowfield is actually a colleague of me at the College of Science and Engineering at Flinders University, and he's an aquatic microbiologist with many years of research experience in the health aspects, especially of water quality, including drinking water, wastewater, recreational waters. So Howard, welcome. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Okke. I thought my role was sort of to reflect a bit on the proceedings that we'd had. So I haven't got a formal presentation, and it may be I may jump all over the place, but I'll try not to. So I'd like just to look at it in the two areas that we've been discussing. One is wastewater treatment, and I think we've had two excellent presentations from both India and Australia. And one of the comments I'd make was there are actually large wastewater treatment plants from metropolitan urban, large cities, etc. And I'm quite interested in what we can do for rural communities in this space, because there's a large number of them in both countries. And I think the rural communities from the point of view of wastewater treatment, and I think the issues are likely the same in Australia, in India and Australia, is that rural communities really can't sustain complex wastewater treatment systems, and they recognize the problem associated with a lack of experience in the workforce, tyranny of distance if things go wrong and you have to issue repairs, etc., reliability. And also these rural communities are really closely linked to water resource management and the water cycle, and they appreciate this idea of reusing water and not wasting a drop. And I think they're very clued in to these sort of opportunities for reuse. I think also in these areas, one thing we haven't really mentioned to any great extent is there's also the energy component of wastewater treatment and greenhouse gas emissions and CO2 emissions. But also we shouldn't forget the fugitive emissions from wastewater, and also from wastewater reuse when we enrich, maybe in Australia, poor organic content soils with more organic carbon, and we start to see degradation of the organic matter and CO2 release from these reuse situations. Having said that, those issues that are being recognised, I think in rural communities in Australia, in South Australia in particular, there's an interest in moving where there's land availability to extensive treatment systems that are more nature-based, low input, low energy, maybe taking longer to effect treatment, but are appropriate for those sort of conditions. And they tend to lend themselves then to decentralized power sources like solar power and battery systems, where you really are remote. In remote communities in Australia, they start to become really beneficial and have some advantages. I think on commenting about the reuse side, I think also some of the discussions we had, they assume we've got an effective reticulated water system to begin with to enable us to have flushing toilets. And we didn't really consider what happens where you don't have that, where you have pit latrines. And that sort of brings me to something that's in both the decentralized and centralized systems. We all end up with biosolids, and biosolids are a tremendous source of nutrients as well. So I think with wastewater reuse comes also a consideration of reuse of the biosolids from wastewater treatment, how we can effectively and safely use those. I think talking about nutrients, I think the wastewater, we often get caught up in the fact that it's quantity we're interested in, that we want a replacement source of liquid to irrigate. But of course, wastewater often has high nutrient contents in terms of, depending on the degree of treatment received before you start to reuse it, have large concentrations of potentially nitrogen and phosphorus. And quite often we undervalue those, I think, in agricultural uses, that we've got a fertilizer replacement value there. And that has all sorts of spin-off benefits if we start to value the nutrients we're supplying to agriculture in the agricultural context. Some other uses that one of the comments I would make as well, and I think it's already been made in some of the breakout groups, is that we really need water fit for purpose. Water really can have very different qualities depending on the end use, and the end use really describes what level of treatment is required and the amount of energy you need to put into those systems. I'd also make a comment as well that there's other applications in terms of green space irrigation and urban irrigation for minimizing the heat island effect in urban conurbations. We're talking about food here, but it could also be reuse water for other applications. And one of the things that we've been interested in is the idea in communities where you irrigate green spaces and you actually increase activity, sporting activity, and that has beneficial effects on health just by having more green spaces where you can go and play, recreate and play sports. And I think that's an important consideration too. And then finally, I think we've all considered risk management, and I think Australia has the comment was made in one of the breakout groups that Australia is very conservative and maybe we need to loosen up a bit. But I think Australia has a proud history in terms of managing risk. Australia was the first to adopt from the food industry the hazard analysis critical control point technique, which is where the multiple barrier approach comes that we talk about both in drinking water and wastewater. And that mechanism was subsequently adopted by the World Health Organization. And there's some very good resources there from the World Health Organization, like the Sanitation Safety Planning Manual, which takes case studies to show how risk management has been used to implement safe wastewater reuse. So I think risk management from the point of view of human health and environment, in terms of, we mentioned soils and groundwater issues when we start to reuse and not want to degrade soils or degrade aquifers that might be adversely affected. And I also think we're pretty good at public health risk assessment and risk management in Australia. And as Okke said, I'm a microbiologist, and I would be wary about leaping to the adverse effects of emerging contaminants compared to the adverse effects of viruses, protozoa, and bacteria. And we should always keep our eye on that ball as well in terms of its ability to adversely affect large numbers of the population. And on that, I'd probably leave it at that point. I mean, we really didn't talk about many aspects of possible reuse, indirect or direct. We've mentioned MAR, and I would think the reuse of biosolids is something that all should be integrated into discussions like this. So thank you for your time, and I'd say there's plenty to discuss and plenty to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. Much appreciated for your presentation. Very interesting. So now I would like to open the forum for questions to both presenters, which you heard in the beginning part of our workshop, and the two panelists. Best probably to send your questions in via the chat, but you're also happy to open up your microphone and we can see and listen to your questions if you like to do it that way. So yes, I hope you're still keen to poke the presenters and panelists with all your questions and ideas. I would be, if there is not directly a question, I would be interested to know maybe from one of the Indian contributions, more on the rural aspects of wastewater treatment and use, which Howard Fallowfield introduced. Do you have experience with that? Is that feasible to go to that level at local rural communities?
Yeah, maybe I will respond. So what is happening, as you can say, the wastewater treatment scenario in India is not great. Okay. So we should accept the fact. Only 33% of the total wastewater generated is being treated, and most of them are in the centralized wastewater treatment systems, which are in the major cities, right? In Tier 2, Tier 3 cities, there is minimal wastewater treatment, okay? So we should also understand how rural India works in terms of wastewater. In cities, the wastewater is combined. That is, the gray water and the black water flows as a combined stream, because that is what the modern toilets will give you. You have houses, apartments where both of them are combined, and that flows through the underground pipe drainage network, and it is brought to a centralized location, and it is treated to generate treated wastewater. In rural areas, your gray water is what flows out, all your black water is typically in your pit toilet systems, where you have 2 pits where black water goes to that, and that doesn't necessarily get mixed to with the gray water which is flowing. So this is in general. There are exceptions. There are some villages where they don't have a pit. Sometimes they leave it into the gray water, but generally this is what happens. And this is in rural areas. But there are intermediate tier 2, tier 3 cities where there are lacks of wastewater. There is no wastewater treatment, and minimum treatment happens in nalas, where the water are the canals which are bringing water or wastewater to the surface water bodies. So this is the not so happy state of affairs in India. There are a lot of interventions by the government to come up with inline wastewater treatment systems, and that is going on. So these things are being explored. This is my observation. I will leave it here, and Professor Thippeswamy has any other things, definitely he will add.
Oh, fundamentally in India, now there is a tremendous momentum gained up in treating the wastewater at rural level and peri-urban areas with the intention of going for fecal sludge management. Basically what he has said, Mr. Rao has said, is that so the pit latrines, of course we are in a very bad scenario when compared to the world scenario. Almost 600 million people were open defecation was there. Now things have straightened up. I think today's scenario is quite amenable, and today I think a lot of towns and cities and rural areas, they are providing this. See, in most of the states now, this fecal sludge management, carrying this sludge from the individual houses and bringing it to the say treatment plant, and separation of solid and liquid is happening. And in fact, see, I was advising to Tamil Nadu government, where see that a lot of projects have been taken, and in most of the states now this is happening. But that is not mainly because the cost of providing a sewage treatment is almost 50-60 times higher than this particular. So I think even this fecal sludge management in developing countries is a common affair, and I think till we get 100%, probably 100%, not even the megacities doesn't have 100% sewer system. I mean sewage system. I think there is outskirts of many of these megacities still have the similar thing, and they also have some fecal sludge treatment plants. So I think the days to come, probably we will be moving ahead for a better treatment of this sewage and sunlight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thippeswamy. Howard or Anne-Maree, would you like to give a reaction maybe?
Yeah, that was really the point I was making. I mean, we have fecal sludge, biosolids, etc. That was the point I was making about managing those, and I'm aware of the centralized management and then dewatering and then reuse, potentially composting, etc. I think it's the comment really about with the pit latrines, etc., and those systems. Then you are dealing with a solid system, but it's the opportunity. Are there opportunities where, as you've said, where there's maybe the opportunity to reticulate sewage to a wastewater to a central system, and then an appropriate level of treatment, and then followed by reuse is something that may be an interesting option. I mean, I think the first presenter, Dr. Rao, those tanks that are being used really are, to me, are very similar to waste stabilization ponds in the way that they're likely to be acting in large open bodies of water with long retention times, and the only difference is that they're acting as infiltration basins. So there's that sort of technology can be used in rural communities as well, and there's other technologies too that would be reticulated to central treatment systems, and then enable and facilitate reuse in those communities potentially. I'm just interested in exploring that with Indian colleagues if possible.
I think also that, sorry.
Definitely, I'd like to collaborate. So, sorry, definitely. Yeah, you're right, Dr. Howard, that it's not a waste stabilization pond. We're not putting waste into it. We're putting treated water into it. But yeah, it does give us the residence times, and eventually the water quality is improved. We do see that. And because of surface aeration and water flow in open channels, it is used as an underground recharge tank. So, but it is secondary treated water which is being added in there, not necessarily waste, but in some tanks, local waste does get into this small stream of it, but it gets treated. Naturally, it gets treated and becomes better. Definitely, I would be really happy to collaborate and explore the science part of it.
Yeah, because I think classically, they might be seen as maturation ponds where you've already done the secondary treated, and then you put it in and you're getting some nutrient polishing and some pathogen removal based on long retention times. So it's a very similar system, I think, and there's probably some analogies can be made between the two, I think.
Yeah.
So I'd be very happy to carry on discussion and see if we can do some collaborations on those systems.
Definitely, I'll write to you and then we'll see how we can collaborate. Perfect.
There we go. Anne-Maree.
Yeah, I think the point, it's a really important point that the urban centres have the treatment plants, but the production of vegetables and other horticulture crops is often in the rural areas where we know that there's not the implementation of some of the guidelines or regulations. So we just have to be realistic about managing that health aspect in those areas, because it's much easier to manage it on a centralized scale. But when we get into the rural areas, that's much more difficult. I think that I just also meant to mention the person that did from Melbourne Uni that did the PhD was Gayatri Makala, and she did a study around a framework for determining and establishing the factors that affect wastewater treatment and recycling. And her case study was Hyderabad. So if people are interested in that example, I can send that through to anyone who might be interested as well.
Thank you. That's good to know. I would be interested to hear from others who maybe haven't contributed yet so far in terms of your experiences or your thoughts about wastewater use and reuse in either Australia or India, or lessons that can be learned. Anybody who has some experience that he or she would be willing to share?
Okay, I was thinking of asking a question to Mr. Thippeswamy and Dr. Rao.
Go ahead.
Given that in India, the collection system is an issue for the wastewater, is it not necessary to sort of? I think my comment would be, the priority for India now is to invest in the good collection system before we go on to build a high-tech wastewater treatment system. So I just wanted to hear from both of them about that. Thank you.
Professor Thippeswamy, you're muted, so maybe you want to remove your mute.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Can I respond? Okay.
Yeah, please.
Yes, go ahead.
Incidentally, there is in sewerage system there are two important components. Basically, one is sewer network and followed by treatment. Fortunately and unfortunately, more attention is given for treatment rather than conveyance system. The asset management of sewer system is one of the key elements, because the fact that the land use pattern is changing on a regular scale, and there is a need for reviving the existing sewers and the capacity of those. And secondly, the quality of material used over a period of time. And these are creating a lot of problem. And one is capacities, second is quality of pipeline, and quality of laying are some of the important parameters. I think unfortunately, see, in most of the cities and towns which are there in the mega cities, I have observed that these lot of sewage is overflowing, or because of the fact that there is a increased discharges. Secondly, the quality of pipes are very bad, and no asset management has taken up. And these pipelines are pretty old and badly required because of the financial constraints of each utility that they are not being attended. I think they have constructed many sewage treatment plants, but many of them are not getting the design flows, or what they are being flown in directly into the stormwater drains. This is the case in Delhi, this is the case in Hyderabad, this is the case in Bangalore, which is very, very common. I think a lot of attention need to be given in sewer system, particularly for sewer network. I think that is a very costly affair, and that is why the utilities are not getting the required revenues in order to implement that. But they get some funding from outside, but that is not adequate to make the entire thing for either rehabilitation or replacement of the network. My observation. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree with Professor Thippeswamy. So can you guys hear me? So my comments are along those lines, right? First is I'll talk about Bangalore city, which I know more than other cities, and I would imagine the other cities are not very different from Bangalore city. Bangalore city does not have separate water collection systems. That is, stormwater drainage systems separated from underground UGD network, we call underground drainage network, where wastewater is collected. Although the intention was to have separate collection systems and then bring them to water treatment plants, it has failed in its execution because of rapid growth of a city. So at locations, stormwater gets mixed with drainage network, and your sewage treatment plants end up getting overloaded with huge quantities of water which are diluted in its nutrients during rainy seasons, which happens to be between, now this year it is happening from May, June, July, August, even to beginning of September. These things gets mixed, and you have dilute streams coming into STPs. So that is one not so good things about the Bangalore city, and it's not very different in other cities as well. Having separate networks is an ideal world, but we are not there yet.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question, Professor Dharma?
Yeah, I think that's very good. Thank you very much for that. And I appreciate both of those last reactions with respect to the conveyance system, a very important part. I would like to give the floor back to Karen to close off this workshop.
Thanks very much, Okke, and thanks again to all our speakers and our moderators and all of you participants for your contribution to the discussions today. I just wondered whether we could pause for a moment and if everyone could turn on their cameras, because we'd love to get a photo to impress people with, you know, who's here in the crowd. It'd be great to see your face in the photo. Thanks everybody for turning on. Just wonderful. And just while we're doing that, I'll just make sure that our administrator is able to capture that. If not, that will be me. Thank you very much. And I also want to make a special thanks to Mr. Rakesh Kashyap and Dr. Rajaram Purohit from the Jal Shakti Ministry, again, for all their help with these workshops. One of our issues is we've had to change. We were going to have a fourth workshop on next Thursday, but we're going to change that date and also the focus of that workshop. So it was going to be on water policy, and in fact, India is bringing out a new water policy, so we're going to wait for that, and I think we'll have a really great workshop later on when that policy is issued. So the next workshop has been moved to a Tuesday. It's Tuesday the 7th of June, the same time, and it's going to be on water informatics for sustainable water futures. So we hope you can join us on Tuesday, June the 7th for that fourth workshop in our series. And I'd also like to invite you to send in to us your case studies. We're going to write to thank you all for participating. If you could send in your case studies, we can include them in our report to our government departments, both in India and in Australia. And any that we don't include, we will, in that report, we will post on our Arch India website. So you'll get some profile for your case studies, and also it will act as a, you know, lessons and knowledge exchange for others looking to collaborate between Australia and India. Now, this is really the end of our official program, but I'm going to invite those of you who would like to stay on and join a breakout room. These are networking breakout rooms, and we've got 3 different rooms operating. One's on recycled water for agriculture, one's on direct and indirect potable use and reuse of water, and the third one's on social and cultural issues relating to recycling. So these rooms are going to open for the next 30 minutes. And if you're interested in collaborating between Australia and India on research topics around those 3 issues, please join a room. And these are going to be self-moderated. So you need to introduce yourself to whoever's in the room and say what you're interested in collaborating on. And they're really for you to strike up a conversation about what you would like to do, your ideas for research collaboration. We're not going to record them. They're just for you, for your use. Now, in a few minutes, the breakout rooms will pop up on your screen and you self-select into them. So you have to click join. And when it pops up, you might see a whole list of names. You need to scroll down to the very bottom so you can see the rooms, and then click join on the room that you want. And I would invite you all to leave your cameras on for that, because it's really great if you can do so. Yes, I can see we've also got a poll asking you how you found these workshops. So I hope some of you can answer some of those questions there. So let me thank you all very much once again for your participation, and thank you to our distinguished speakers for joining us today. We really appreciate all your insights, and we hope to learn from you, but also to share more widely through our reporting and our recordings that we'll be uploading onto the websites.